The board will now come to order. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Here. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Here. Alderman Volmer. Present. Alderwoman Martin. Here. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Here. Alderwoman Howard. Present. Alderwoman Green. Present. Alderman Oldenburg. Here. Alderman Roddy. Alderman Kennedy. Here. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Present. Alderman Vaccaro. Present. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Cone. Present. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
Here.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Bosley. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderman Arnowitz. Here. Alderman Roddy. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Ogilvie. Alderman Williamson. Here. 20. You have 23 present, Mr. President.
Quorum being present, we will be led today in prayer by Elder Evangelist Valencia Clay from Life Center International, Kojic.
Good morning. All hearts and minds clear. Father, because of who you are, we give you glory, we give you honor, we give you praise that is due your name. We want to thank you for another day that you have allowed us to be left in the land of the living. God, we thank you for life, for health, for strength. We thank you that we are clothed and in our sound minds. God, on this Mother's Day weekend, we thank you for the mothers that you have given us. We thank you for the things that you have done for us. And God, as we stand in this place, I ask that you would bless the proceedings that are going on in this house. Like Amos said, let justice run down like water and righteousness as a mighty stream. And God, we ask that you would do what you do. You be God in all the circumstances that's surrounding this city. God, bless all of the aldermen. Bless the president and all of the aldermen and all the alderwomen. God, just bless everyone that has gathered to this morning in this place. And I know you'll be here because I asked you to. And you said that whatever I ask in your name, you would do. So God, I'm looking for strength, for courage, for power, for anointing, for perseverance, Jesus, for everything that's good and perfect because it comes from you. And God, let the words of our mouths, even in this place, and the meditation of our heart be acceptable in thy sight. Oh God, you who are our strength and our Redeemer, in Jesus' name, amen.
Let's give an evangelist a big round of applause. That was a beautiful prayer to open up today, this Mother's Day. Thank you. We have a special order today. Today we're going to honor some of the mothers from throughout our city. I know various different alder people invited some of the mothers. We have Alderwoman Davis with another special presentation for the mothers. So Alderwoman Davis, would you like to approach the dais with your guest?
good, yes, definitely. Okay. Good morning to everyone. What a blessed day that we can say that we are here. I thought it was very special to recognize some of our mothers directly here in this chambers today, but I wanted to start it off with something special. And all of you all know me, I gotta go big. I don't know anything else. So I would like to introduce to you Belle Darius. She is a professional violinist. She's traveled across the country. She's very well known here locally, and she would like to serenade you to start off our session this morning.
Let's have the mothers join us. Can we have the mothers join us up on the dais? Come on, join us up on the dais if you come
The
around.
microphone will pick you up real good. Okay. So what we're going to do is we're going to line these steps facing over. Is it okay? So everybody can get, yeah, we start here. Yeah, you stay back. A little short people. Let's line up these steps right here. If they step up. Y'all, you little short people. Come on over here. Line up. Okay. Can you be seen? Go. Can you be seen? On the shoulder. Okay, I'm gonna sit in the back. I'm gonna stand up in a minute here. We're gonna do the same thing on this side here. And same side there. We just wanna feel your steps. We wanna make sure everybody is safe. Everybody safe. Here, we don't fall in the
Yes, I'm trying to make sure I don't want to hit anyone once I start. No, I played with Paul Symphony before, but I just played all over with different bands and different. Awesome. Okay.
That was outstanding. Let's give her one more big round of applause. We also need our majority floor leader here, the Alderman from the 18th and the Alderman from the 17th, if he's here, to join us here at the dais. Alderwoman from the 19th, would you like to lead us off? Just a couple words, and then I'll take it from you.
When we think about the role of mother, it is beyond anything that occurs on earth. If you are a mom, a mother, and you are focused and you are excelling with your children, your family, your mates, you are definitely a hero. You see, you can't think about yourself every day. You got to think about everybody else, and you got to make it okay. You also know that even if you didn't birth a child, and I know many of you up here, you are taking care of somebody that was put on this earth, and you are still a mom. And so what I want to say to you today is there's very little that we could do to give you the type of recognition that you need and deserve, but one thing we can do is say thank you. We want to thank you because we know we are living in troubling times, and it requires all of us to be guiding counselors, you name it. And so we can't stop. If anything, we've got to excel and do more. So to all of you here, I want to say thank you. I want you to know, and most of you to know, that we are here to assist you when you're trying to make a difference on this earth, in this city, in this region. So I would like to go ahead, if you don't mind, Mr. President, and turn it over to our illustrious Alderman of the 18th Ward. You know he's my king.
I didn't know I was illustrious. Okay, thank you. Mr. President, members of the board, I do like that description, illustrious, but I didn't realize that was the case. Where would we be without mothers? Where would we be without women? Kwame Nkrumah, the first president of the freed Ghana, said that you can measure the sophistication and the evolution of a nation by how they treat their women. If they maintain oppression of their women, then they truly indicate their lack of development. For women have been the backbone of our communities and our societies. Without them, where would we be? Now, you could quote the obvious and say, well, they give birth to all of humanity. Yeah, we can say all of that. But certainly, they take the next step further, which is to nurture and to ensure that the next generation survives. Not just survives, but thrives, develops, and advances. It is their soft hand. It is their quick words. It is their how you doing that makes the difference. When we find ourselves in hard times, it is mothers that help see us through. There is a great responsibility that we all have, but certainly our women have shown us. They take the responsibility to care for more than themselves and just their own children. They teach us that we have a responsibility to each other. They give us a quote that we've heard, which is an African quote that says it takes an entire village to raise a child. But more so than raising one child, they help to raise a community. They help to bring forward a society. They help raise a nation. Where would we be without women? Where would we be without mothers? Our traditions teach us that certainly we want a mother to have been a woman first, and then a mother, but nonetheless, they take on the mantle no matter how heavy the burden. They hold things up. They push the men forward and give us a reason to be inspired to advance and to be better than what we are. To that we say, thank you. To that we say, congratulations. To that we give our appreciation. So much you hand to us. We ask that you continue to do it, that you don't stop your work, that you don't allow the ills of today to cause you to become like something that you are not, because we need the woman's hand. Thank you for providing us and giving us in helping to advance this city, this state, this community, this nation, this world. Where would we be without mothers?
Tell you what, we have some great leaders at this Board of Aldermen, leaders like the Alderman from the 18th, our floor leader. Let's give him a big round of applause. Leaders like the Alderwoman from the 19th, who thinks beyond the bounds. Let's give her a big round of applause. And each and every alderman out there, I just want to thank all of you all for what you do each and every day, especially the mothers. I'm going to be brief, but I'm going to talk strictly about love, because when you think about a mother and what a mother does beyond just giving birth, a lot of it is love, and particularly agape love, which is the highest form of love, because it does not require anything in reciprocation. It's a one-way love, and that's what you have. It's unconditional. So you give it without expecting anything in return, and that's what you've done with all of your kids, and it has made a difference. It's helped them to grow up to be strong adults. And I know it's not always easy. Speaking as a son and one of 9 kids, I know it's not always easy, because we gave our mother fits, but she gave it right back. And we loved her. We love our mother, and she has provided us with our foundation of strength. So I just want to thank you on behalf of people who cannot be here today to thank you. I want to thank you on behalf of people all across the city, my family and friends, for what you've done as mothers. And on this weekend, Mother's Day, I'm hoping that you all have a great Mother's Day. Let's give them a big round of applause. And not to call out anybody individually, but I just want to, I think it's appropriate that we do say, Ms. Culpepper and other mothers up here who have lost their kids to violence, our heart goes out to you. You know, understand that we want to work with you to make things better for other mothers and other families across this city. You know, every time you hear about a murder or someone losing their lives on TV, understand that there are victims that are created with that also. That's somebody's mother, that's somebody's son, that's somebody's daughter, that's somebody's grandson, somebody's grandchild. People love them. And we need to put it in that context and not just about a number. It's not number 100, it's not number 99. That person had a name and somebody loved him. So on this Mother's Day, let's remember that. And let's recommit ourselves to a better St. Louis. Let's recommit ourselves to understanding that families are being broken up all across our city when those things happen. So on behalf of residents of the city and my family and friends and members of the Board of Aldermen, I want to just thank the mothers that have gone through those types of losses also. Any other comments from members of the board? Alderwoman from the 14th.
Yes, Mr. President, I'd like to recognize my constituents, Mary Caldwell, president of the Newport Heights Neighborhood Association. She's behind you on the other side. And Retta Crawford, the secretary of Newport Heights Neighborhood Association. And I'd like to commend them for and wish them a happy Mother's Day. We all know it's not an easy job, but it's a rewarding job when it's all said and done. Thank you for coming out.
Alderman from the 27th.
Yes, Mr. President. I want to thank all the mothers, and with me being a mother, I tell my girls that when you become a mother, you don't get an instruction book.
There you go.
So it's an on-the-job training process, and with each kid, you learn as you go. And so by the time you get to about the 3rd or the 4th, you're an expert at it. You write the book. So I thank you all for coming down here. I thank the president for thinking outside the box and recognizing you guys. But I also want to say to residents of the 27th Ward that are mothers, happy Mom's Day.
There you go.
Because you deserve that recognition. Because like I said, it's on-the-job training, and the pay is minimum to what you should be getting. Thank you.
Yeah. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I might sound a little funny. I welcome all you mothers. My mother was a mother of 18.
Woo!
But I stand here because my mother's not here anymore, and my ears are stopped up, and I need a remedy to unclog my ears. So any of you mothers have any remedies, let me know. Just stop by my desk and try to get my ears unclogged. Thank you, and God bless.
All right. Alderman from the 12th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I also would like to thank all the mothers, especially the ones down here today and the ones that couldn't be here. I'd also like to recognize Ms. Bev Bremer. She is the president of Princeton Heights, that is part of my ward. I think a lot of people really don't realize what a mother was until you lose them. And you wish every day they were still there. So I know I've been doing it. I lost my mother at 57 at a very young age. But I think about her every day, and I really appreciate the mothers who do their best to raise their kids and help them get through the right path. Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion?
Oh. You got another alderperson.
Alderwoman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to also stand and good morning, Mr. Alderman from the 4th. I'm glad to see him back. I want to also stand and wish all the mothers of the city of St. Louis and those that are here with us, those that sit on the floor of the board of Aldermen. Pam Boyd is my pretend mother over there, Alderman from the 27th. And my mother, a happy Mother's Day. I grew up not only with a mother, but my mother's older sister. They're only 2 years apart, so all of my life, and my mother's gonna get mad when I say this, I always said I had 2 mothers, and my mother always says, you only have one, but my Aunt Gerald was also always in my life, so I grew up thinking I knew who my mother was, and that is my heart, but my Aunt Gerald is my mother's older sister, and she's also my heart, and I have 2 other aunts, and that my mother's sisters, and I am so fortunate because I've been nurtured by such loving women who have taught me to be an independent woman, that when you get knocked down, you get back up, that you do the right thing, even when people are not doing the right thing to you. But they also taught me, don't ever forget what people did for you or to you, okay? And then you act appropriately. You may forgive them, but you never forget. That's the women in my community, okay? Happy Mother's Day to all of you.
Oh. Wow. So very quickly, okay, you have to talk to the president. Okay. I want to just take a moment to recognize somebody that most of you know, because you know how she fights the battle on the street for those who are less fortunate. And so Mama Cat is up here. Raise your hand, because some aldermen don't know who you are. And we need to do more to help her on her journey. So I've pledged to help more. And then aside from that, she's also the second mama to somebody that I love. And so we kind of related. So we're going to be working together. So I just want to thank you for all that you do, Mama. Okay? Thank you.
Good morning. I just wanted to say to the Board of Aldermen, all the women, all the men, that you all too enjoyed this Mother's Day at home. And as I looked at you all out there, I saw how you all was looking up here and giving us your undivided attention. And I want to let you know, gentlemen, that are sitting there looking at us, that we appreciate that. You all need to get them a hand clap because they are looking, and I want you to know I appreciate that. And I couldn't go out without saying, I could not leave without saying that this also goes to you all, that you enjoy your Mother's Day weekend, whether your mom is with you or not. You always have a mother, and moms have produced all of you all that are sitting here today. You are leaders. You come across our TV, and you don't know that someone else made that possible for you to do. And I said I'm gonna be short. But once again, thank you, Mr. Reed. Father's Day is coming soon, and you won't be forgotten either, okay? All right, I'm gonna make sure that you fathers are also, it ain't got to be here, be on the streets, that you too could be remembered for what you've done. That's what's wrong with us today. We're not taking out the time to appreciate and to show no love. Take care.
Again, let's give one more big round of applause for the mothers and thank them for all that you do. And speaking as a son and one of 9, understand that your kids love you. Even if I know a couple of my brothers and sisters, they don't call my mother on Mother's Day, but trust me, they love her and they care for her. And we are so appreciative of all that you do each and every day to continue to stand behind us and continue in the work to make St. Louis a better place to live, work, and play. Let's give them one more big round of applause.
My second mother. To the moms on the floor that are aldermen. Give one to the moms on the floor. Okay. Mothers. Yeah. Aldermen. Yeah. Okay.
Majority Floor Leader and the Vice President, there are roses up here for you guys to pass out to the mothers on the floor also. Return to our regular order of business. Introduction of honored guests. Any introduction of honored guests? Alderman from the 7th.
There we go. There we go. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my honored guests today Megan McBride and Ken Franklin. Thank you.
Alderman from the 13th.
Yes, Samuel Adams, I love that name, and Jeff Hans from the Carpenters District. And I would also like to recognize Bev Bremer and Mary Caldwell and Terry Powers also. Thank you.
Alderman from the 12th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to introduce as my special guest Ken Franklin with Bi-State, Demetrius Alfred, president of Local 73, Sean Weller from Congressman Clay's office, Chris Pickle and Leroy Grant from AT&T. And I'd also like to recognize Lou Hamilton. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
Hello, everyone, and good morning, Mr. President. Again, I'd like to introduce the members on board of Local 73, Demetrius Alfred, Nathan Lett, and my constituent, Jeff Glorioso. I'd like to welcome them to the board today. Also, Megan McBride from Kelly Group, and Lou Hamilton. Thank you.
Alderman from 27th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to welcome my guest, Frederick Searcy with the Plumbers and Pipe Fitters, and Reverend Darrell Gray.
Alderman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest today, James Page. He is the new interim executive director for the Downtown Neighborhood Association. Where are you, James? There he is over there. Thank you.
Alderman from the 23rd.
Yes, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to have as my special guest Cedric C. Sharp, better known as C. Sharp, and I'd like to welcome all the committee men and committee women that came today on the board bills.
Alderman from the 11th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to have as my special guest Anthony Lancia with the Association of General Contractors and Beth Brimmer, president of Princeton Heights Neighborhood Association. Thank you.
Alderman from the 14th.
I neglected to include Shannon Weber on my previous introduction from the St. Louis Kansas City Carpenters Regional Council. Thank you.
Alderman from the 21st.
Hey, thank you, Mr. President. I have a slew of special guests today, starting off with Bishop Elijah Hankinson, who is the president of the St. Louis Clergy Coalition, Pastor Irvin Ybarra. Please hold on to applause. I got a long list. Today's a special day. Pastor Irvin Ybarra of Greater Progressive Church, which is located in the 21st Ward. Zaki Baruti, who is the president of the Universal African People's Organization. Anthony Shaheed, famous agitator and activist, who scares everyone. The Honorable Reverend Darrell Gray, who is the president of the Missouri State Baptist Convention Progressive Caucus. And also Mr. Percy Green III, the vice president of Fire, and his father, the legendary Percy Green Sr. And also representatives from the Uhuru People's Democratic Movement, who is up in the gallery.
Any further introductions? I also like to just special shout out to Brother Shaheed and Brother Zaki Baruti. Thank you for all your works throughout the community, working to try to make St. Louis a better place for all and working for equality. I know it's not easy work, but understand we appreciate it. Let's give them a big round of applause with everybody else that showed up. Any other introductions? Alderman from the 10th, like to wrap us up.
Thank you. Hello. Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Actually, I do have a guest today. People do know me. I'm honored to have with me today Michelle Klupe, the committee woman for the 10th Ward, sitting at my desk.
Yeah.
And as we're gathered here on 5/11 on this Mother's Day weekend, this is in 1998, the first euro was minted, changing currency over there. In 1984, an event happened that changed the alderman from the 23rd's life forever. Joni married Chachi on TV. And this is Root Canal Appreciation Day. And on Mother's Day weekend, I'd like to mention that even the alderman from the 23rd had a mother. Thank you.
We also have Andy Knott and Gretchen Waddell Barwick from the Sierra Club. Thank you for joining us here today. We really appreciate it, and thank you for all your works. If there aren't any more introductions, approval of the minutes,
We have none, Mr. President.
report of city officials.
From the Office of the Mayor, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Residence Inn Downtown and the Downtown Community Improvement District. The appointment of Ms. Janessa A. Corpus, who resides in the First Ward, who resides in the First Ward and whose term will expire on March 8, 2019. The appointment of Ms. Ashley Henderson, who resides in the 23rd Ward and whose term will expire on March 8, 2021. The appointment of Mr. Corey Hodge, who resides in St. Charles County and whose term will expire on March 8, 2019. The appointment of Ms. Laura Lashley, who resides in St. Charles County and whose term will expire on March 8, 2019. The appointment of Mr. Dale Rusatz, who resides in St. Louis County and whose term will expire on March 8, 2021. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments.
Mr. Clerk, did you take up the first one, the City Hospital Powerhouse Community Improvement District?
Oh, I'm sorry,
Yeah,
Mr.
let's take
President.
up the first one and then we'll go to the
I did them out of
second.
order. I apologize. I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for reappointment to the City Hospital Powerhouse Community Improvement District. The reappointment of Mr. Stacy Hasty, who is a property owner in the 7th Ward and whose term will expire on July 12, 2021. The reappointment of Mr. Michael Hayo, who is a property owner in the 7th Ward and whose term will expire on July 12, 2021. I respectfully request your approval of the reappointments.
Alderman from the 7th, you recognize on the mayor's appointment to the City Hospital Powerhouse Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I move to approve the mayor's appointments.
Moved by the Alderman from the 7th. Entertain a second on that motion.
How about a second?
Seconded by the Alderman from the 6th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Dear members of the board, I have the pleasure to submit the following individuals for appointment to the Residence Inn Downtown Community Improvement District. The appointment of Ms. Janessa A. Corpus, who resides in the First Ward and whose term will expire on March 8, 2019. The appointment of Ms. Ashley Henderson, who resides in the 23rd Ward and whose term will expire on March 8, 2021. The appointment of Mr. Corey Hodge, who resides in St. Charles County and whose term will expire on March 8, 2019. The appointment of Ms. Laura Lashley, who resides in St. Charles County and whose term will expire on March 8, 2019. The appointment of Mr. Dale Rusatz, who resides in St. Louis County and whose term will expire on March 8, 2021. I respectfully request your approval of these appointments.
Alderman from the 6th, you recognize on the mayor's appointments to the Residence Inn Downtown Community Improvement District.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'd like to have this appointment moved to the Neighborhood Development Committee, please.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 6th and seconded by the Alderman from the 20th that we send the mayor's appointment to the Residence Inn Downtown Community Improvement District to the, which committee?
Development.
Neighborhood Development Committee. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Please assign the appointment to the Neighborhood Development.
So noted, Mr. President. Line item 6B, copies have been placed in all of the aldermen's mailboxes.
There's nothing further?
There's nothing further, Mr. President.
We would dispense with line items 7 and 8 through 10. First reading of board bills.
Board Bill number 1, sponsored by President Reed and Alderman Williamson. It is the budget proposal fiscal year 2019 or 2018 and 2019 and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill 48, sponsored by Alderman Roddy. An ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission to change the zoning of property on the Central West End form-based district map from NG1 Neighborhood General Type 1 Zone to NCT1 Neighborhood Center Type 1 Zone in Block 3914 of the 417R West Pine, and to further change the overall boundaries of the NG1 Neighborhood General Type 1 Zone and the NC1 Neighborhood Center Type 1 Zone established under Ordinance 69406 and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 49, sponsored by Alderman Roddy, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Service to conditionally vacate a portion of the right-of-way on the north side of Forest Park Avenue abutting City Block 3919E as bounded by Laclede, Spring, Forest Park, and Vandeventer, and adjacent to 3763 Forest Park. Board Bill number 50, sponsored by Alderwoman Martin, an ordinance recommended by the Planning Commission on May 7, 2018 to change the zoning of property in City Block 2861 from B to Family Dwelling District to the F Neighborhood Commercial District at 560103 South Broadway and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 51, sponsored by Alderwoman Ingrassia, an ordinance amending ordinance numbers 69979, 69980, and 69981, approving and authorizing the execution of a First Amendment to Redevelopment Agreement between the City and ROL Capital 3, Inc., authorizing other related actions and containing a severability clause. Board Bill number 52, sponsored by Alderwoman Tyus, an ordinance pertaining to income that is exempt from the city's earning tax, amending Section 8 of Ordinance 47063, approved April 28, 1954, as amended by Ordinance 64586, and is codified in Section 5.22090 of the City Code of Ordinance, is by adding a provision exempting any income received by a person in the form of or related to a grant, vesting, or exercise of stock options, performance shares, or performance-based stock related to incentive plans from the city's earnings tax and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill number 53, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Building Code with amendments, including appendices E, F, G, H, I, and J, repealing Ordinance 68610, Ordinance 68788, and Ordinance 69271, and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. Board Bill number 54, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Residential Code for one- and two-family dwellings with amendments, including appendices E, F, G, H, J, K, M, R, and S, and T, repealing Ordinance 68789 and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. Board Bill number 55, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Fire Code with amendments, including appendices B and C, repealing Ordinance 69600 and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. Board Bill number 56, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Existing Building Code with amendments, including appendices A, B, and C, repealing Ordinance 68790 and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. Board Bill number 57, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Property Maintenance Code with amendments, repealing Ordinance 68791 and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. Board Bill number 58, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Energy Conservation Code with amendments, repealing Ordinance 68792 and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. Board Bill number 59, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance pertaining to the Mechanical Code of the City of St. Louis, repealing Ordinance 68639 and Ordinance 68847, adopting the 2018 International Mechanical Code with amendments, including Appendix A and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 60, an ordinance adopting the 2018 International Fuel Gas Code with amendments repealing Ordinance 68638 and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. Board Bill Number 61, sponsored by Alderman Kennedy, an ordinance adopting the 2017 National Electric Code with amendments repealing Ordinance 68831 and containing a penalty clause, severability clause, savings clause, and emergency clause. That is the extent of the first reading, Mr. President.
Mr. Clerk, please assign Board Bill Number 52 to Ways and Means.
So noted.
Reference to committee.
Ways and Means, Board Bill Number 1 and Board Bill 52. Transportation and Commerce, Board Bill Number 45. Streets, Traffic, and Refuse, Board Bill Number 49. Housing, Urban Development, and Zoning, Board Bills 48, 50, and 51. Public Safety, Board Bill Number 53, 54, 55, 56, 57, 58, 59, 60, and 61. That is the extent of reference to committee, Mr. President.
Second reading.
Board Bill Number 46, sponsored by Alderwoman Green, an ordinance renewing the Tower Grove South Concerned Citizens Special Business District and containing a severability, effectiveness, and emergency clause. Board Bill Number 42, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Comptroller, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, making certain findings with respect to the transfer of up to $4 million of excess monies that the city intends to transfer from the Debt Service Stabilization Fund to the Airport Development Fund for the purpose of making funds available to address Coldwater Creek emergency repairs, stabilize banks and channel, and containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 43, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing a first amendment to Section 1 of the Airfield Building and Environs Projects Ordinance 70617, which authorized a multi-year public work and improvement program at St. Louis Lambert International Airport, increasing the total estimated cost of the airport building and environs projects by $4 million to $19 million, adding a new project to the list entitled Coldwater Creek Emergency Repairs, Stabilized Banks and Channel, authorizing a first supplemental appropriation in the total amount of $4 million from the Airport Development Fund into the airport building and environs projects, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 44, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing and directing the Director of Airports and the Comptroller to enter into and execute the Second Amendment to Lease Agreement AL-222 between the City and MHS Travel and Charter, containing a severability clause and an emergency clause. That is the extent of second reading, Mr. President.
Before we move any further, I'm just now seeing that Bishop Hankerson is here. Bishop, could you please stand? Let's give him a big round of applause. Thank him for being here today. We really appreciate you. Bishop, if you would like, you could join me here at the dais also. It's your choice. Please join us. Yeah. Bishop is doing all kinds of things around the city, and it was just shocking to see him back there. We've dispensed with line item 14, perfection consent.
Board Bill Number 4, sponsored by Alderman Kotar, an ordinance recommended by the Board of Public Safety to conditionally vacate travel in a 10-foot wide L-shaped alley in City Block 798 as bounded by Shenandoah, 10th Street, Lamai, and Menard in the city. Board Bill Number 30, sponsored by Alderman Mohammed, an ordinance directing the Director of Streets to temporarily close, barricade, or otherwise impede the flow of traffic on Anderson at the north curb line of Dryden and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 31, sponsored by Alderman Vaccaro, an ordinance establishing a four-way stop site at the intersection of Mardell and Sulphur, regulating all traffic traveling eastbound and westbound on Mardell at Sulphur, and regulating all traffic traveling northbound and southbound on Sulphur at Mardell, and containing an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 7, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission, the Board of Public Service, and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, establishing and authorizing a public works and improvement program at St. Louis Lambert International Airport at a total estimated cost of $15 million, authorizing an initial appropriation in the amount of $5,382,543 from the Airport Development Fund and containing a severability and an emergency clause. Board Bill Number 8, sponsored by Alderwoman Davis, an ordinance recommended and approved by the Airport Commission and the Board of Estimate and Apportionment, authorizing a first supplemental appropriation in the total amount of $481,302 from the Airport Development Fund into the Airfield Building and Environs and containing an emergency clause. That is the extent of the perfection consent calendar, Mr. President.
Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion for the perfection consent calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move for adoption of the perfection consent calendar.
Moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Board bills for perfection.
Board Bill Number 21, sponsored by Alderwoman Howard, an ordinance submitting to the qualified voters of the city a proposal to revise Section 2 of Article 8 of the City Charter, which requires city employees to reside within the boundaries of the city and thus allows said employees, except for city agency and department directors appointed by the mayor, to reside outside of the boundaries of the city, and providing for an election to be held for voting on the proposed revision and the manner of voting thereat, and for the publication, certification, deposit, and recording of this ordinance and containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 14th, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill Number 21.
Mr. President, I'd like to amend Board Bill 21.
Before we have to first let's get it in front of us.
Okay, yes, I'd like to place Board Bill Number 21 before.
Move for perfection.
Move for perfection.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th. Entertain a second on motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd, 21st, and the 23rd. Alderwoman, please proceed.
This board bill puts before the voters of the city of St. Louis, and I'd like to set that date by an amendment.
Okay. So do you have an amendment on everyone's desk?
Yes, everyone has board amendment number 1 to amend the said board bill, page 2, line 15, to page 2, line 16 as follows. Beginning on page 2, line 15, and continuing page 2, line 16. Strike out the words and figures day of blank, 20 blank, and insert in lieu thereof to read in the words and figures as follows. The 6th day of November, 2018.
All right. Would you like to make a motion to...
I'd like to make a motion to amend Board Bill 21.
With amendment number 1. Been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderman from the 19th. Any discussion? It's been moved and seconded that we amend Board Bill number 21. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Now what's before us is the amended board bill. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying yes, there's some discussion? The board bill 21. Yes. Yeah, Alderman from the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President.
All right.
Would the sponsor of the bill yield to questions?
Alderman from the 14th will yield for questions to the Alderman from the 24th.
Yes, I will yield for questions from the Alderman.
Please proceed,
from the
Alderman.
24th.
Thank you. I have to ask a question because I honestly don't know the answer. How long has the residency requirement been part of the charter?
I believe since the city charter started.
Okay. So 104 years or,
Right.
or so. Right. Okay. Thank you. That's my only question. I don't have a super strong opinion on this, but I feel like it's fair to point out that this is a pretty substantial change to how we have been doing business for a long time in the city. We've had a residency requirement that says most, of course not 100%, but most employees who work for the city have to live in the city. We know that most people comply with that. Not 100% of people do, but most people who work for the city do live here. And this would eliminate that requirement for all but a very small number of people, basically less than 1% of city employees, basically just department heads that run each department. That's not going to have an enormous effect on day one, because I don't think every city employee who lives here is going to sell their house as soon as they can. But we know that that is going to have a substantial effect over time. So if we're looking down the road in the future, we know that 20 or 30 years from now, a much, much smaller percentage of city employees are going to live within St. Louis. My guess would be that it'll be a comparable percentage to the proportion of St. Louis City residents who are their proportion within the region, which is about 10% of the region's population, maybe 11% lives within the city. 30 years from now, probably 10, 15% of city employees will live in the city. And of course, many city employees at that point will have never lived in the city, possibly never even lived in Missouri. That's a pretty substantial change over time. I don't have any animosity over where people live, but I do think there is value in terms of employees of the city having sort of an intimate knowledge of the place where they work. I think that's especially important for departments that have a lot of interactions directly with residents. I would say in particular the police department. One of the core Ferguson Commission report recommendations is cultural competency in terms of policing. And I can usually envision a scenario 30 years down the road where we have a lot of police officers who have never spent a night in the city of St. Louis, who may be culturally, quite frankly, kind of unfamiliar with the residents of the city of St. Louis. And I think we ought to proceed with a little bit of caution here. I think my personal feeling is I'm 100% willing to entertain some change to the residency rule. Maybe we have a longer period, like a probationary period, so people don't have to move immediately, because I understand that does make it hard to recruit for a lot of positions. When you expect people to sell their house and move into the city within 90 days for a job that maybe pays $35,000 a year, that's a big deal. And I'm also willing to consider maybe we shouldn't have a permanent residency requirement. Maybe it shouldn't be the whole time you're employed. Maybe it should be 5 years or something. That was kind of the 7 years was the compromise that was struck in the past with police department and with the fire department. Maybe that's reasonable for all city employees. But I think completely removing the residency requirement is, without a doubt, over time, it'll certainly, on the one hand, it will help with recruiting. But on the other hand, it will, without a doubt, mean that every year a bigger and bigger proportion of city employees will have no experience living in the city. I don't think that means they're all going to do a terrible job, but it does mean that they all have a little bit less sort of invested in the success of the city and may view the city as the place they get a paycheck rather than the place that they need to work properly because they live there too. So I wish we had a little bit different bill before us, because I think there is a better solution out there than this bill. I think change is okay, but I think this particular change does fly in the face of things that a lot of residents want and that a lot of residents have been calling for the last 2 years. So personally, I'm going to be voting no on this, and hope my colleagues consider that as well. Thank you.
All right. Any further discussion? Alderman from the 23rd?
I believe the Alderman. I think Larry was first.
Alderman from the 12th, are you ready?
I believe he was ahead of me.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd just like to make a couple comments on this bill. The alderman from the 24th has a crystal ball. I'd like to know who the president will be in 30 years, whether I want to move or not. But, there's a lot of changes going through the city here, and I think that the voters are the people who live in the city that ultimately, pay taxes along with everybody else, and I think that's the people that we should hear from if you put things on a ballot, whether it passes or it don't pass. I will beg to differ with the alderman from the 24th. I have over 138 police officers that live in my ward that have over 15 years on. I also have 4 county officers and 1 highway patrolman. I don't think personally there would be this big flight, but there's, a possibility. I know we haven't hired a heavy equipment operator in over a year and a half on minimum qualifications. So, we need workers, and maybe if there's maybe an amendment that could be satisfying to the bill, maybe put a 5-year on it, something like that. I don't know. At one time, the police department, I believe, under the police board, it was 7 years before they could move out. Let's not only be, we have a lot of firemen that don't live in the city anymore because they went to court and won their court case. So, they have the right to move out also. It's just like a lot of things when people vote on, maybe we don't do the homework, but, I think it's fair to let the voters vote on any kind of bills that involves everyone living in the city. Even if I wasn't an alderman, I'm not going anywhere. I'm too old. My next move would be in the county at Jefferson Barracks when they bury me. But I personally like living in the city. I enjoy it. I grew up in the city, in the Patch, the poorest part of the neighborhood. Myself, I'd never leave because I don't like a lot of traffic in the county, but that's just my personal thoughts. But thank you.
Alderman from the 23rd.
In the last year, we had 4,500 people leave the city, not all city workers. We're down, Jimmy Edwards came to our meeting, we're down 130 police officers. We can't even get diversity. We have to start thinking outside this. If we're going to keep people from leaving the city, and I'm not talking about just city workers, we're going to have to make this a safe place to want to do business. We need more policemen. We need refuge that's being picked up on a regular basis. We're having trouble hiring guys that actually can operate and drive. If we don't start getting a bigger pool to hire from, and if we don't start being able to go outside the city to find these people that are willing to come and work in the city, we got a bigger problem than whether or not city workers are going to stay or go. We need to make this city a safer place. The amount of shootings that are going on, people are not moving in. If we're going to get people to make this city a safe place, we're going to need to hire more police. We're going to have to hire more workers that we know. And it shouldn't matter where they live. What should matter is how they do their job. And again, my son works in Melville, and I'm glad he lives in the city down the street from me. But really, that's all I got to say. I believe we need to pass this, at least put it in the voters' hands. And again, Jimmy Edwards said we need this. He needs to be able to go to colleges outside the city and recruit. And we need all these services. What's driving people out of the city is when they don't feel they're getting the services they paid for, and when they feel that they feel unsafe. Thank you.
Alderman from the 1st.
Mr. President, members of the board, if I hear Jimmy Edwards' name one more time, who I've represented for about 30 years, I will scream. Because if he said that, he doesn't know what he's talking about. And I'll tell him, and I represent him, and we're friends. We have what's called a waiver with the city of St. Louis. If you make your case and you go to civil service, and we had the director of personnel before my committee for 2 hours, and we had a wonderful meeting. The people were in there. And so I brought that up. If you make your case to civil service, you can get a waiver, and the department heads can get waivers for people, and they actually have to register the waiver with our clerk. So that is a false narrative that's being put out there by the police and the fire department, but mostly by the police, because the police have let it be known that they don't want to live in our city. I've been here long enough that we've had a couple of votes about should we get rid of the resident requirement. It was, I think they were non-binding, but we've had a couple of them. Nobody has ever wanted to do that, okay? But we had a very rich person that came along a few years ago, right after the illegal gerrymandering that they did to my ward, and he decided he got all these great ideas for us. It's the very same person that you all look at that wants to run the city, and he has $1 billion. And he came along in 2004, and Prop A, B, C, D came along. He had all these things he wanted to do. One of them was reduce the Board of Aldermen. I want to say it was to get rid of the elected officials that are county office, and there were 4 things. He was soundly defeated in every single thing. This was a November election for you people who keep telling me about we need a November election. We had one. So what he decided to do is he came along with all his money, put it in the right places, and he gave it to elected officials who shall remain nameless, although you all know I will say names. And then they went out here and they beat the bushes for these things individually, which we had collectively said no. The residency is a great rule. It makes each of us live in our wards. When I hear people say that we don't have decent places to live or there's no affordable place to live in the city of St. Louis, it irritates me and gets on my nerve. The former alderwoman, when I first came down here, when I was the real 20th ward, her name was Joanne Wayne, and she used to say, you need to lay where you get your pay. And I love that. And Terry knows, the Alderman Kennedy knows that. And the reason why that is because you have much more of an interest in a community when you're there. And I know that because I've lived in the Central West End, I've lived in the South St. Louis, and I lived in North St. Louis. And there were things that I did not know that were going on when I lived in other parts of the city. When I moved to North St. Louis, I used to have every year until I got it done, a fit about paving North Kings Highway because it had not been paved in 20 years. That didn't bother me as much when I lived down on Clem in the 8th Ward because I didn't have to drive North Kings Highway because South Kings Highway was taken care of. But when I got north, I knew there was a difference. Right now, we have a policing problem. And the policing problem is their bad attitude about correctly policing people, okay? That's what the problem is, okay? It is their bad military attitude about policing this community. And people keep propping them up. I asked at our hearing the other day, what is the complete benefit that we pay the police? Nobody knows because we got all these mysterious things they get and nobody wants to challenge them because this is the police and we need them. Yes, but I need you to be a good policeman in my area. I love good policemen. I do not like policemen who don't want to live in my community, okay? It's interesting, and I'm going to talk to Jimmy because I hear that and I don't know that that has been Jimmy's position. So I'm going to go right after this meeting and call him to ask him if that's his position. Because his position, the reason why he lives in the 1st Ward, which was the 20th Ward, is because he and I have sat down ourselves, because he's my personal friend, and talked about staying in our community and making a difference even after the evil thing you all did down here. So when I hear that, I just can't believe that that is his position, because the position ought to be not only can no more people move out of the city, we want all of you other people who want to make a pay off the city, and then you want to police my community where you don't know my people, you don't walk the streets of my people, you shoot my people dead, and then we have all of these judges. You want to look at what happens when you have people who are not responsible? Look at the judges. We only in Kansas City and St. Louis do we have judges that are elected and that are appointed by, it don't make no difference, Democrat, Republican governor. We have no say. That's why we had the Shockley verdict. That's why they were comfortable in doing the Shockley verdict, okay? Because we don't have a way to get rid of these judges and we don't have a way to make them pay, okay? And so what we need to do, instead of loosen things up, say to the police, leave, get to stepping then. Get out of our community. If you don't want to police my community, then get out of it. Don't police it. I'd rather not have any police than you shooting and killing my kids, okay? I don't want that. I don't want to be scared every time my husband leaves that you are going to mistake him flower, his cell phone, his camera, his hand, that he had a gun and you put 20 bullets in him, okay? I don't want that to happen. That's what happens when you let people leave your community and they police your community and they tell you, we can't find any affordable places. That's BS. St. Louis is one of the most affordable cities in the United States, okay? And you know what? You don't want to live in certain areas? My husband and I bought the worst house on one of the best streets in North St. Louis. We bought the worst house, and we spent years. When we moved in our house, and I was in law school still, we did not have a kitchen, okay? We had a hot plate and a microwave and an old refrigerator somebody gave us, okay? And we had so many mice and roaches that I cried and called my mom and said, "Ooh, you ought to see what I'm moving into." But that was my husband's neighborhood, where Jimmy lives, a few blocks from me. Okay, and that was his neighborhood, and we moved there. And we've spent 30 years putting money back into our community, fixing it up, making it better. We didn't have a grocery store. We didn't have a Walgreens. We didn't have banks. Those are all the things that I came and I have fought for years so that we could have it. And it wasn't just for the 20th Ward. Most of North St. Louis uses those very things that I put that they take for granted that stopped when they did this evil, wicked redistricting, okay? When they did that, all that stopped. We didn't get anything for 10 years, even though it was for the whole community. Now here we come again. Oh, we want these people to be able to move out because they can't find affordable housing. Come over to North St. Louis then. Go to old North St. Louis then. Come and find affordable houses in my community. If you want to police my community, you want to get paid by my community, then stay in my community. It is not in our best interest to let people get paid and run out to Arnold or Jefferson County. We allowed a few years ago the police to take police cars home. This was before they were allowed to live outside the city. Well, guess what happened when when they went and took us to court, or we allowed them to live outside the city? They were taking our police cars out to places in the county and to Illinois. That is not in the best interest of the city. That is ridiculous. A few years ago, when I was the 20th Ward alderperson, the police used to put out misinformation about the fact that they had to move, because they always got a reason why they have to move out of the city. Then they said, well, we have to move out the city because we have these special needs children, and the special needs children cannot get the correct education. And so we got to move out. We got to move our wives, and we got to live separately for them. So I was the chair of intergovernmental affairs then. Greatest thing, because that's a powerful committee if you make it. And so I went over to the school board and I started asking them. I said, well, is this true? And the school board said, absolutely not. The alderman from the 19th knows this story, okay? That is a lie. That is not the truth. What do? We bring the school board over. We bring the police board over. What we found out is the police were telling not only a lie, but a bald-faced lie. Because what happens is that when you have a special needs children, if the St. Louis Public Schools cannot help you, they pay for your child to be bussed out, cabbed out, and everything else, okay? So your child actually has more rights if you have special needs. The press covered that. The police no longer put that lie out. So, but they keep coming up with stuff. And this is what I want to tell the police and the firefighters and whoever else don't want to live in our city. You're not better than my family. Me and my family live right at Kings Highway and Maffett Place. None of you are better than my family. And we live there, and we live there proudly. Now, guess what? I can live on Lindell if I want to, and any place else. So I choose to live in North St. Louis. I stayed there after I was redistricted. I stayed there because it's a wonderful place to live. And I want to say to all you black preachers and teachers that moved out to the county, and then whenever there was a bond issue, you called me, I hung up on you. Because you know how you make things better? You come and you sit in the community, and you move your people in the community, and then you make it better. When everybody wants to run my community, I call that South African politics. I want to run your community and live someplace else, and I'm talking about the black nationalists and everybody else. If you live in the county, don't come tell me how to run my city, okay? Come and be affected by what's going on in my city, okay? So I can walk the walk and I can talk the talk, okay? But I hear all these people, I want to move out of the city. I don't find no place affordable. What that means, what? You can't live in the Central West End? But there's more places in the city than the Central West End. And guess what? White people live in North St. Louis. Been there. When I bought in North St. Louis, and I got property in Brandon's Ward, Alderman the 3rd Ward. He'll tell you some of the nicest property there is, because all my property, I keep it the way I would want to live in there. And what I tell you, it's been white people on that block the whole time. They didn't get up and leave. Oh, there in Hyde Park, they stayed right there, okay? So some other white people come and stay. Stop finding the easy answer is just to leave. It's like when I hear young people say, well, Miss Tyus, I want what you and Mr. Miller have. Well, get to be 62 and work and go to law school and go down at your buildings and don't have fingernails. I don't have fingernails. I don't get my hair done because I go down to my buildings and I work myself. Have a work ethic. Don't think that you're better than other people. If you have to flip burgers, do that. But stop putting our city down. You do not get good press when the only thing you say is how people want to run, and there's always a reason to run from your city. I tell the people that I represent, I get so sick and tired of seeing these signs. You must stop killing each other. That is a fake thing, and it doesn't stop anything. It doesn't speak to all the racism that has happened to black people, all the it doesn't speak to the history of these of you. They had lines where you could not live above. You couldn't live on Marcus. You couldn't live above this. It doesn't speak to. When I moved to St. Louis, I lived right around the corner from where the current mayor lives. I lived on Waterman, and they were doing blighting with eminent domain. They moved all the black people out of the Central West End. Central West End used to be predominantly black. Oh, we're gonna put them back. Tick, 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 tick. We have not put them back, okay? So there is an agenda going on. And the agenda is that we do not want black people to be in charge of a city that's predominantly black. That's why, when you look down here right now, we used to have, because I got the paper, when the alderman from the 6th was the first black since Pierre Blaine to become the 11th black alderman, and the alderwoman from the 2nd, not her, but the other one, they became the 12th and the 13th black alderman. That was in 1999, okay? And since then, 2 redistrictings, we down to 11 black wards. How does that happen? We are the majority of the city. We're supposed to have 14 or 15 black wards, but we got 11. That's stupidity. That's ignorance. That's when you're supposed to have $15 million and you got $11 million. Where is your money at? Why do you put up with that? I went, and so when we had this last election, because 2004, we spoke very loudly, and then people just came back. Nobody said, well, we shouldn't come back because the city soundly defeated it. Drip, drip, drip. We just keep coming back, okay? Because there's a man with billions of dollars that can keep coming back, and he can buy up our politicians. And those politicians are the ones put their hands, wrap their heads up, and say black power, but they're not really talking about black power because they scared of black power, okay? Black power is Sharon Tyus. I'll stand and speak truth to black and white people, okay? That's black power. That's not black power when you get the money and you got $500,000 sitting in your account. That's not black power. This city is predominantly black. They're doing everything they can to make sure that we do not have the proper amount. For all those people who are going to vote for us to leave out the city, I can't wait to see this vote, because Friday I'm coming back with a new redistricting bill. And the new redistricting bill will get rid of 4 of you white people who are sitting down here who have no business down here, because this is a black city. It's to take the 20th Ward back, and the 20th Ward alderwoman knows. I've told her I never intended for her to keep the 20th Ward, because it belongs right where it belongs, okay? And the 6th Ward, my roommate, that was a black ward. Why is it white now? Because white people know how to play with the numbers and tell you all kind of stuff, and they know how to take those computers and tell you statistical lies. And they tell me, but Sharon, the city is predominantly white. I said, can you do math? Because see, I was good in math, okay? So let me tell you something. Although we only have 11 black aldermen down here, when we run citywide, guess what we do? That's because it's predominantly black. We win. So what happened? When they thought they could win the sheriff's race, and they had 3 other Negroes in the race, and what happened? Vernon Batts won, okay? So this is what happened. So you need to know what's going on here. So we do not want us to control things. So they knew that in the mayor's race we had to have more. When the previous president used to say all the time, he used to be against, Jim Shrewsbury would always be against moving out people and getting rid of the residency requirement. And the reason why he was against it is because he knows the first people that's going to pour out are going to be the people in the 16th Ward and the 23rd Ward and all these wards. So I want to tell you something, good white people, as you go to vote this. If you don't want to all all black city. You better rethink what you're doing, okay? Because you all have the most city jobs. There are no people who run anything except for Jimmy. That's why I'm tired of hearing his name, that live in my community. In the 20-something years I've been down here, the director of streets does not live in my community. The director of forestry, all of those people who make those decisions about our life, the reason why our trash don't get picked up, because we never had anybody who lived in North St. Louis since I've been down here that was in charge of things. So when all these people saying to you, but we want to do all this stuff so it's in the best interest, it is not in the best interest of us. It is in the interest of making sure that black people don't run the city. And we are scared, all the black people, we scared of running our own city. That's ridiculous, okay? That is racist, that is self-loathing, that is self-hating. I know what's going to happen to my community because I got middle-class black people. So when they did redistricting, guess what? A lot of middle-class black people said, I don't want Irene to represent me, I'm out of here. Or, I don't like Troop, I'm out of here. I was going around begging, Jimmy Edwards being one of them, please don't leave. We're only 5 minutes from what we have to now call the Central West End, which used to be North St. Louis, until racists dug that out and carved that out. Please don't leave, because we live in nice neighborhoods. And we live in affordable neighborhoods. So that whole thought about letting people leave because we cannot have affordable neighborhoods, we have them already. That where we have these openings, well, why aren't you applying for a waiver? If Jimmy Edwards thinks that we need to get more police officers, he want to go down to colleges, then apply for a waiver until we can do better. We have waivers. But no, there's a bigger agenda, and it comes from a billionaire named Rex Sinfield, who, if you look up in 2004, he was backing all of this, and he's slowly but surely been getting this. It started with, we now do not have an elected circuit clerk. We do not have an elected public administrator. This is a greater agenda that has nothing to do with where we have affordable housing, because the whole city, with the exception of where we put billions of dollars in the central quarter, is very affordable. And so what you really mean is, well, I don't want to live in affordable where black people live. Then that's you racist, and you shouldn't be policing me, and you shouldn't be doing my fire, because I'm not scared of living in any part of town, and I have lived in all part of town. When people told me, when I moved here and then I moved south, the black people told me, well, you shouldn't go down there. That was in the 70s. And I said, why not? Because black people don't live in South St. Louis. Well, why don't they? Well, I'm black and I'm going down there and live. So then when I moved to North St. Louis, the white people said to me, oh, you shouldn't go there. And I said, why not? Because those people will get you. What? You don't know I'm black? I'm black. And I'm not scared of black people, and I'm not scared of white people. We are people, and we need to stop this. And we let people divide us and come up with these fake agendas that has nothing to do with who we are. We're better than this. We ought not to let this. If you don't think we got good policing now, wait till we let the police occupy us. That's what they'll be doing. And the firefighters, who I really love, because I've never heard a firefighter say, oh, I fear for my life, so I'm not running into the fire. Guess what firefighters do? So you all are my heroes. Y'all run into the fire. Y'all don't kill people and say, well, I'm going to just let you burn up because I fear for my life. That's a problem we got with the police. We need mental evaluations for the police. We need drug evaluations for the police. We need to recruit people who say, I love St. Louis, because that's what I do, and I will continue to be opposed to people moving out of the city and getting paid.
All right. Hey, I know I, for one, really appreciate when people come out and watch the meetings, but we have to proceed with our meetings, and one of the things that we try to limit are loud outbursts during the meeting. So if you will please refrain from that, that will help us move on. Alderman from 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to share my concern about having a police department that has never spent a night in the city. I think the alderman from the 24th brought up a very valid concern with that. Our city is a phenomenal place to live. Our neighborhoods are great places to raise families, but they are unique. They are different than the surrounding areas. And I think we really need to make sure that we have a public safety department and a policing department that understands and can really identify with the residents of the city of St. Louis and the struggles that we frankly face in our community. It concerns me to remove that entirely. Of course, this isn't just about our police department, it's about all city departments. I think he left some time ago, but one of our city's finest employees, Ed Young, was up in the audience earlier lobbying for the removal of the residency requirement. If you don't know Ed, he works for St. Louis City Tow, and he's one of the finest employees that we have. And he's expressed that we do have hiring concerns, and we have a real issue with hiring people. And I think that's a real concern. It's a real issue. But let's be frank. I think that the issues are varied. It's not just that we have a residency requirement that is preventing people to come work for the city of St. Louis. We don't pay people as well as surrounding counties pay. This is a budgetary issue. We don't get people in the door for interviews in a timely manner. There are all kinds of issues. We have an unemployment rate in the city of St. Louis that is 50% higher than the surrounding county. We have people that live in the city of St. Louis that are actively looking for a job and can't find one. And we have city jobs going unfilled right now. That is a major problem. Areas like the 20th Ward, where I represent, have an even higher unemployment rate than we do in the city. And I think we need to do a better job of getting those jobs, the availability out there, and getting our current city residents employed. What I fail to understand with this bill as we are right now is a real rationale for taking the first step to remove the residency requirement as opposed to looking at our hiring practices and improving upon them. And so if you may, Alderwoman from the 14th, I would like to ask...
Would you like her to yield for questioning?
I would like to ask you a couple of questions, and if you wouldn't mind, would you yield for questions?
Alderwoman, you have to direct it to me.
Excuse me, Mr. President, I'd like to inquire of the Alderwoman from the 14th to yield for questions.
Alderwoman from the 14th will yield the question to the Alderwoman from the 20th.
Yes, Mr. President.
Alderwoman from the 20th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Alderwoman from the 14th, if you could provide a rationale for taking this as a first step to addressing our hiring issues, specifically at a time where it's my understanding that we have an unofficial hiring freeze. And just an overall understanding of why we're taking this step now. I have really not understood a rationale for doing this at this time, and if you could provide just a general overview of just why we're looking at doing this, that would be helpful.
When I initiated this, there wasn't a hiring freeze. It came to me because we have a hard time delivering city services to our constituency, although we've taxed them more, and it's harder to get people to work because we don't have sufficient people. So my thought was that if we're truly, looking to serve our constituency, we need to have the people power to do that. And in that research, I found that the residency seems to be a sticking point for people to be hired. Now, when we look at that, I mean, people are focused on the police, but that is not the main reason. And the police have not even appealed to me about this because the police, many of them, other than till when we took it over, have moved on and no longer live in the city. So I think that argument is sort of set aside. I'm talking about general city services such as trash pickup, towing, those issues where we have entry-level positions and people may be living in the ring suburbs and then they look at the requirements, they'll have to relocate. And, many of these people have had, the economy now and the way people work isn't that they get a job, they stick with it for 50 years like back in the day. Many people change jobs and maybe by the time they're 30 years old, they're on their third job. Well, it may be a hardship for them to have to pick up and move in the city. And addressing the Alderwoman from the first, the racial issue, we have an economic flight from the city, is what we have. We don't have, as much, I don't believe, as much of a racial flight from the city. We have an economic flight. People, make their money and move out of the city because they can afford to for better lives. So I think that, and we also have incentivized that by having the DSEG program in the schools. Children move out of the city after they finish at schools that they went to as DSEG students. They don't come back in the city and live once they've moved to Parkway and they see, you know, life might be better. And that was part of the reason the desegregation program worked, that this was to integrate our city. If we want to continue the archaic practice of separating people, then let's keep doing it. You know, if we expect to get a different result, we need to open up the borders. We need to look at regionalism rather than our little inside our borders mentality. So if we're looking to get expertise, we have students that we have, you know, that have moved out of the city because they've been successful. And I think that by putting that border, that artificial border, that wall up around our city, we're only asking for more of the same of separatism and the Delmar Divide.
Have we done our due diligence? Have we taken a look at the issues associated with our hiring practices as they are? Have we taken a look at what we are willing to pay a tow truck driver versus what St. Louis County or other surrounding areas are willing to pay? Have we taken a look at the hiring practices, how long it takes a person to get in the door for an interview? Have we taken a look at and exhausted eradicating some of the issues that are currently involved in our hiring practices first, as a first step? Have we even taken a look at some of the information I would like to see regarding how we're conducting hiring? What I have failed to see is an attempt to address some of these issues outside of removing a residency requirement and changing the charter in such a very, very significant way. I think we had one hearing on this bill. The general public did not have an ample opportunity to come out and speak about it, to share their thoughts. I know my residents are dismayed that this got very little playtime, very little attention in the general public, and they would like to weigh in on this. They would like to understand why it is that we are having a difficult time hiring people. Have we taken a look at those interview processes? Have we taken a look at how we get the word out? Are we going out to our neighborhoods with high unemployment and telling people about those entry-level jobs in the tow lot and in forestry and other departments that have unfilled jobs? Have we taken a look at the fact that we don't provide city services to an adequate level? But is it a hiring issue? We continue to make cuts to every city department every single year, and we expect to be able to provide the same city services. We are not providing good raises to people. We do not provide competitive salaries. It is no surprise that we have a hard time hiring people, but is it based on a residency requirement? I don't see proof of that right now, and I have seen a failure of us to really take a look at that in depth, and I think that as an issue as serious as this really, really requires a very in-depth analysis of what we're doing. And I've just failed to see that.
Did you get the information I sent to you?
When did you send it?
I believe I asked that it be sent last week, but I sent it again last night, and it should be on your desk or in your mailbox.
Unfortunately, the internet doesn't work very well in these chambers, so if an email came through, I have failed to get it. I will attempt to get it at this point, but again...
And to address some of your questions, the reason for this is to put it before the voters. Let the voters decide on this. I think that they're the people that should be deciding, are they getting adequate service? Do they think this is important? And it will not slide through on an easy, simple majority. It's, I believe, a 64% majority. So I think it's important to let the constituency that I represent weigh in on this and let them decide.
Well, I appreciate that. I think to imply
what we do here today is not saying that we've suspended the residency requirement. It goes to the voters. I think we need to keep that in mind foremost.
I do appreciate that, but I do think that to say that the reason why we are not providing a decent level of city services to our citizens is because we only hire from within our city limits is an insult to city residents. To say that in order to provide a good level of city services, we have to hire St. Louis County residents?
I did not say that. I said that we need to broaden the net.
We have very fine city residents.
Don't misquote me.
And what I would like to do before moving this forward is have a more in-depth look and involve the general public in a discussion rather than simply a vote. That's all I.
Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 15th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Would the Alderwoman from the 14th yield?
Alderwoman from the 14th will yield to the question from the Alderwoman from the 15th.
I will.
Alderwoman from the 15th, please proceed.
Alderwoman, are you able to tell me what the unemployment rate is for the metropolitan area?
Say that again.
Would you be able to tell me what the unemployment rate is for the metropolitan area?
No.
It is.
I don't have those numbers right here in
Okay.
front of me.
It is 3.4%.
Thank you.
What about the unemployment rate for the city of St. Louis?
I think it's around 7%.
You are correct. What about the employment rate for the wards, the 11 North City wards that encompass the Promise Zone?
I'm not hearing you.
The 11 North Side wards that encompass the Promise Zone. Do you know the employment rate for that?
I don't.
It is 20.91%.
Okay.
I bring up these numbers because I think we have to admit that we have people who need jobs within our city.
And we have programs for that.
And that the issue is not that we are not casting a wide enough net. The issue is that we are not effective in connecting the people in our communities who need work to the jobs that exist in the city of St. Louis. Alderwoman, did you support Prop P? Did you support Prop P?
I did.
What was one of the reasons that we were told that we needed to support Prop P?
Because we need more police and better policing.
And so one of the ways to do that was to increase salaries, right? And if we increase salaries through Prop P, that would get us to a point where we would be able to fill these vacancies within our police department. That's what we were told, correct?
I believe that was part of the issue, yes.
So can you explain to me why 5 months later we're here and we have the same problem and we really haven't given Prop P time to work in recruiting? We haven't really given increased salaries time to show that we can get more people into the police department. What is the reason for doing this now and not giving that the opportunity
I don't know
to show
that the
that
two
it
have
doesn't
anything
work?
to do with each other. You're talking about policing, we're talking about city services, all city services, not just policing. So I don't know that the two are related.
And the police number, though, is what continues to be brought up. That, you cited Judge Edwards saying we're down 130 officers, and the way to fill this is by, expanding the boundaries, when just 6 months ago, the way to fill this was by raising our sales tax to the third highest in the country.
I think Mr. Edwards, Judge Edwards' contention is that this may open up a way to hire more minority officers and broaden our base in that realm. But you would have to direct that question to him, and that's what his proposal was, that because, as I told the Alderwoman from the 20th, we have opened up our schools and had the DSEG program since the 80s, okay? So we have virtually sent minorities to the county schools, and many of them have taken up residency where they went to school. So we have qualified people out there, but they're not willing to move back in the city.
So I don't have these numbers with me at the moment, but I would suppose to say that a city that is about 51% African American would have a larger African American pool to pull from than a region that is not 51% African American. Would you say that that is probably correct?
I think when you think about it again, we've had economic flight. You can talk about white flight, but I think there's been economic flight in this city as people move up and become a little more economically stable. They tend to find ways to move out of the city, regardless of residency requirement. Most of the people, when you figure what our population is, the numbers that work in the city, I don't think it's significant.
Okay. Thank you, Alderwoman. No further
Okay.
questions. I rise in opposition to this today for many of the same reasons that the Alderwoman from the 20th and the Alderwoman from the 1st said, and that is that I don't think we've done our due diligence as a city in connecting people in our communities that need jobs to the jobs that are available. And I think if we are broadening our recruitment pool rather than training up people in our communities to have access to these jobs, we are selling ourselves short and we are selling our communities short. So I would ask that folks really take that into consideration. I think that this is going to hurt minority recruitment within both the police department and the fire department. And I think that we are going to see, actually in southwestern city where we have a lot of first responders now, I think we're going to see a number of people who start fleeing the city. And I think the last thing that we need in this city is less population. There are ways that we can incentivize people moving into the city. There are ways that we can work to ensure that people who need work in our communities are connected to the jobs that are out there. And some of this is an economic issue. It is that the city needs to figure out how we give our city employees raises. Because we find money in the budget for all of these special projects, all of these things that enrich people who already have money, but we do not put that emphasis into getting people in our community access to jobs and access to resources that are going to improve their lives. So I hope we remember that, and I hope we consider that, and I urge folks to vote no. We need to go back to the drawing board and take the time to figure out how to decrease our unemployment rate in this city by connecting people who need jobs to the jobs that we have available.
Alderman from the 7th.
President, members of the board, I enjoyed that back and forth. It was interesting to hear our colleague from the 15th espouse the benefits of Prop P and talk about giving it a chance after so vehemently opposing it at the ballot box. Would the Alderwoman from the 14th yield for a couple questions?
Alderman from the 14th will yield to the Alderman from the 7th.
Yes, I will.
Alderman from the 7th, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. Before voting on this, I want to make sure I'm clear on a couple things, and I know there's been a lot of back and forth today. Does the Public Safety Director support this going to the ballot?
Yes, he does.
Okay, how about the Police Chief?
I have not conferred. I believe he is along with it. Yes, he has.
Okay, and
basically.
just Wednesday, I sat through a lengthy committee hearing where many of the folks speaking against this today were espousing the great virtues of our wonderful Director of Personnel in the city. He gave us a very lengthy and informative presentation, and I believe he has expressed support for this, hasn't he?
Yes, he has.
Okay. Now, the next thing we're going to debate, I think, today is going to be related to the Board of Aldermen and its size, and I'm not going to go down that path right now, but I want to point out, so I'm being consistent logically, because one of the points of argument that's going to be brought up is, we should let the people decide. And I do realize that the people have voted on this in the past, have they not?
They have.
So in 2004 was that last vote?
I believe, and then after that, I think there was a straw ballot. Straw vote,
Okay, but we haven't, the last time the voters voted on this was in 2004.
Right.
And they voted it down.
Right.
And they might do that again.
They might.
Okay. But since 2004, we still have a number of vacancies in city government, don't we?
Absolutely.
A lot in the police department?
A lot on the police department, a lot everywhere.
Everywhere.
We have
Okay.
over 100 and some odd vacancies throughout, not counting the police.
So in that 14 years we've had this residency rule in place, we continue to have vacancies, correct? In that 14 plus years since our last vote, we still got a number of vacancies in city government.
Yes, sir.
Okay, so maybe it is time to revisit this. I don't know actually personally how I'm going to vote on this at the ballot box, but I'm willing to put it to the voters. I'm willing to talk to my constituents and see what they think. And if the Director of Personnel thinks this is a good idea, and the Public Safety Director and the Police Chief, I think it's worth at least putting to the voters. So I thank you for tackling this tough issue, and I rise in support. Thank you.
And I'd like to respond to that. Since it's going to be on the November ballot, we have plenty of time to converse and have dialogue about it with our constituents. And that was one of the reasons I put it off rather than rushing it to the August ballot.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman for the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President and members of the board. I'm just going to make a brief comment. I don't have any questions of the Alderwoman from the 14th. one of the things that I wanted to share with you is we tend to bring too many issues and confuse what it is before us. So you see, people want to talk about it's hard to recruit individuals. No, it's not. If you have the right intentions and if you do it the right way, it's not a problem. If you connect properly with those entities that are out here to help you recruit, it's not a problem. This Board of Aldermen has looked at 4 positions in the last 2 years. We've had applications from all over the United States of America. And we don't pay enough at the Board of Aldermen for anybody to want to work here, okay? So it is not the problem. We want to talk about heavy equipment operators. MoDOT is a partner with the City of St. Louis, the Urban League. They will train people free. They will also help them find positions with other companies that do the work around this region. It is not a problem. But at the end of the day, because we have such special interests, don't confuse this. Now, I know that the people have voted on this twice, and they're tired of us coming back to them to ask us to vote for this. But you know what? If it's brewing, take it back to the people. Let the people decide again. Because you have to remember, 14 years later, there may be a different population out there, and they may have different interests. Although all the emails I got have blistered me about why are you ignoring the vote that I've already had out there. And even on that other issue we're going to talk about, they're saying the same thing to me. But I shared with my constituency that if it is brewing like this, the best way to resolve it is to take it back to them. So I am going to support this. It has nothing to do about problems recruiting anybody, because that's not true. And the first thing that I would suggest, if you're looking for police officers and firemen, is you need to go back and look at the last 100 or 150 people that applied, and I guarantee you, you will find 50 to 75 of them that were duly qualified, overqualified, and should have been hired. Thank you.
Alderwoman from 28th.
Mr. President and fellow members of the board, I rise in opposition to this bill today, not because I have strong opinions on one side or the other, and not because I don't think that the people should have an opportunity to vote on this, but because I don't feel that we as a board have done our work. I sit on the committee. I was there at the hearing last session. We had unanswered questions. We came back as a committee again this session, and I feel those questions still were not answered. We're being told that we'll get more information before this goes to the people. However, yet so far, most of what we've heard is anecdotal evidence. It's compelling to hear from the public safety director and from the director of personnel. However, we don't have numbers on how many applicants do we have. We don't have numbers on how many people are turned away because they're not qualified. We don't have numbers on how many people aren't moving here because of affordable housing issues. There are so many things that we have not educated ourselves on. So to send this to the voters before we've done the work ourselves, how can we expect them to make an educated decision on this issue if we have not done the work ourselves? There are other alternatives. A few have been thrown out today, whether there's a 5-year minimum, a 7-year minimum. We haven't discussed any of those in the committees, and that is the purpose of those committees. That is the purpose of a deliberative body. So I rise in opposition to this bill until we do our due diligence. We owe that to the people before we put this on the ballot. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 14th, you're recognized to close.
I renew my motion.
It's been moved by the, it's been a request. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 14th, seconded by the Alderman from the 21st, that we perfect Board Bill number 21. There's been a request for roll call. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. No. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther? Alderman Vollmer? Alderwoman Martin? Alderman Arnowitz? Alderwoman Murphy? Alderwoman Howard? Alderwoman Green? Alderman Oldenburg? Alderman Rhodey? Alderman Kennedy? Alderwoman Davis? Alderwoman Spencer? Alderman Muhammad? Alderman Boyd? Alderman Vaccaro? Alderman Ogilvy? Alderman Cone? Alderman Williamson? Alderwoman Boyd? Alderwoman Navarro? President Reed?
No.
Alderman Vollmer? Alderman Cone? Sixteen aye votes and 13 no votes, Mr. President.
By vote, you sustain the motion. The Alderwoman from the 14th and perfected the amended Board Bill number 21.
Board Bill number 25, sponsored by Alderman Muhammad, Alderman Kennedy, Alderman Moore, and Alderman Bosley. An ordinance submitting to the qualified voters of the city a proposed amendment to the charter to maintain the Board of Aldermen as a body of 28 aldermen representing 28 wards and preventing its reduction beginning December 31st, 2021 to a body of 14 aldermen representing 14 wards as called for under Article 1, Section 3 of the city charter, providing for an election to be held for voting on the proposed amendment and the manner for the voting, and for the publication, certification, deposit, and recording of this ordinance, and containing an emergency clause.
Alderman from the 21st, you recognize on the perfection of Board Bill number 25.
Hey, thank you, Mr. President. I move to perfect Board Bill number 25.
Moved by the Alderman from the 21st, and seconded by the Alderman from the 18th. Alderman from the 21st, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. President. I know that this is a very controversial topic. We all have our own opinions. We all have our own ideology. And we all have differences. But if there's one thing we have in common, I think it is we all love St. Louis. Right? St. Louis, not Kansas City, not Indianapolis, not Milwaukee, not trying to be like any other municipality or any other city or any other county. We're the city of St. Louis. We have 28 members of the legislative body. That has always been the city of St. Louis. If you want to talk about accountability, transparency, and representation, then we need more, not less. In fact, I think North St. Louis needs 28 aldermen by itself. We have so much work to do, and we can get it done if we all believe in each other and work together. I said this in a committee hearing. When we passed the minority inclusion bill, we did so without any opposition because it was the right thing to do for St. Louis. We can do that on any other bill, any other legislation that we want to, if we choose to, but we have to work together. The current plan to go to 14 wards is fiscally irresponsible. There is no real transition plan. There is no strategy. There is no legislation. There are no policies set in place to how we're going to reduce our wards and our aldermen. That is irresponsible. That is not the job of this body. Our job is to ensure that everybody has equal access to opportunity and achievement, not only in our wards, but in our city. Mr. President, again, I know this is controversial, but anything that's important is always controversial. Anything that's worth fighting for is always controversial. This is about efficiency. If you want to be an efficient government, if you want to ensure that everyone is equally represented, then ward reduction is not the way to go. If your goal is to disenfranchise voters in neighborhoods, then you support ward reduction in its current form. In its current form. That's not saying ward reduction is a terrible thing in St. Louis, but the current plan that we have that was passed in 2012 by the former Alderwoman from the 7th Ward, Ward Bill number 31, in its current format, it's a terrible bill. It's terrible for North St. Louis. It's terrible for black representation. It's terrible for the city of St. Louis. Mr. President, I would like to introduce amendment number 1 to Board Bill 25.
Okay, is the amendment on everyone's desk?
Yes, sir, Mr. President, I believe so.
All right, you'd like to make the motion for adoption of amendment number 1 and then talk to us about amendment number 1?
Yes, sir. I move for the adoption of amendment number 1 to Board Bill 25.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the clerk, make sure everyone has it. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 21st, seconded by the Alderman from the 18th and the 3rd. Alderman, could you please review amendment number 1?
Amendment number 1 only specifies a date for the ballot initiative for voters to go back and choose how they want the future of our city to be. We chose the ballot date of April 2019. I renew my motion, Mr. President.
Any discussion on amendment number 1? Alderman from the 7th?
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Would the Alderman from the 21st yield for questions on the amendment?
Alderman from the 21st will yield for questions on amendment number 1 to the Alderman from the 7th.
Yes, Mr. President.
Alderman from the 7th, please proceed.
Thank you. I guess before we vote on this amendment, Alderman, would you be willing to elaborate on how you decided to put this on the April 2nd, 2019 ballot? I believe we've got 1, 2, 3 elections before that April election. How did you decide on that election?
Well, thank you for the question, Alderman. I believe that we need real time to educate voters on what ward reduction is. Ward reduction is not redistricting. Every 10 years we redistrict. So that's not new to voters. Ward reduction, when you're talking about taking out wards and taking out aldermen, that's something completely new. And our voters, for 4 times previously to 2012, we voted against ward reduction. So it is my opinion, and also the opinion of a working group of elected officials, committee people, and aldermen, and community leaders who believe that we need real time to educate voters on what it actually is. And with 28 wards, it's going to take a little time, so we chose April 2019.
Okay, so April, historically our lowest turnout elections. That's when we're going to put this issue that's so important to you to the voters. Let's see, what was the turnout in April in 2017? A whopping 30%. 30% turnout in that election. I believe turnout in the 2012 election, when this was passed by the voters in the city, was upwards of 70%. So if you're serious about this and you're serious about redoing this vote, why don't you put it on the November ballot where it belongs?
I appreciate your comment, Alderman.
That was a
And
question.
Again, I appreciate your comment, Alderman. And again, the working group who is leading this effort, we decided for April 2019.
Okay.
Now, if you want to talk about voter statistics and voter data, then to me as elected officials, it should be our job to make sure that the voter rate is higher in every election, regardless if it's November or April.
Right.
So if we actually want to represent our wards and represent our constituents, then we need to make sure that we are actually ensuring that they vote in every election, not just in one out the year.
Okay.
That's my opinion.
Thank you, Alderman. Well, you know, I think it's pretty clear where I stand on this. I rise in opposition to the amendment and in opposition to redoing this vote. You know, we haven't even, the voters overwhelmingly, at least in my ward, and 61, almost 62% of the city voted in favor of this overall bill back in 2012, and I think it's time to give this a chance and reform our government and have larger discussions of regional government reform. And I think it's really disingenuous to put this on a ballot in April when voters in a general election, a federal election in 2012, approved this, and now we're going to put it in what is historically our lowest turnout election, so committee people and aldermen can keep their jobs instead of doing the hard work of actually reforming ourselves and this body in the next 2 years before the redistricting. Thank you.
Mr. President, if I may.
Hold on for a second, because he had control of the floor. So, any further discussion? Alderman from the 16th.
Yes, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Mr. President, will the Alderman from the 21st yield for questions?
Alderman from the 21st, will you have questions to the Alderman
do.
from the 16th? Alderman from the 16th, please proceed.
Good afternoon, Alderman. Just turned noon. When did you first introduce this bill?
What, Bill 25?
Yeah,
Roughly 2 weeks ago.
let's go. So would you say you got a pretty speedy hearing, you got a pretty speedy committee hearing, and a vote out in a pretty good fashion? Second rant,
I don't understand the intent of the question, Alderman.
do you think you got an expeditious and speedy committee hearing and vote out on Board Bill 25?
Absolutely not. I think that we all work together to move Board Bill 25 through, and I think that's the job of us in the legislative body to work together to do it. I don't think that it was rushed through any quicker than any other board bill.
Okay.
We work together to get it done.
Do you think mistakes are made in bills when they get rushed?
I think mistakes are made, period, in government. And again, if we work together, we can eliminate some of those mistakes.
Sure. I mean, we're going to have probably even longer discussions philosophically on board reduction, and we'll probably even all make up historic lessons and what happened in charter amendments along the way. But I'm going to talk a little bit about process, because I think this was rushed quickly to get a hearing. It was voted out very quickly. And that's the time that I feel that we should be discussing and deliberating and making sure we get what we want to put on the ballot right. Now, I thumbed through. I'm getting to the... That was important.
Alderman,
From the 16th ward was going to focus on the amendment, then we can go circle back around and focus on the board bill.
yes. Hey, Alderman from the 16th, keep your comments germane to the election date, and then you'll have an opportunity on the bill as well.
Certainly. How I'm setting up here, but how the landscape here, how my comments are germane and questions about the actual board bill introduction, and in the 2.5, 3 weeks that it got introduced, and now we're going to have almost a year-long process before it actually goes to the voters. So I think that's the connection that I'm trying to make here. So this was quickly kind of rushed through, and there's some typos in the bill, but everyone gets a mulligan on that. I make plenty of typos. We could fix those. I'm more concerned that the date itself is now being introduced as an amendment. So we're talking about the amendment. The date itself is being introduced as amendment, and that wasn't thoroughly thought through and discussed in committee on when the date would be. So do you know why the date might not have been discussed in committee, and how that relates to how now we're extending a really long time to make sure we educate voters on the board bill language?
Alderman, again, the date was chosen by a collaborative and corroborative group of elected officials and community leaders. That includes pastors, aldermen, committee people, and also just community stakeholders. And it's also my opinion, as I said to the alderman from the 7th Ward, it's my opinion that this group is more than capable of coming up with good legislation as it relates to the advancement of St. Louis. So, again, the question is the same, so my answer is going to remain the same. The group chose this date, a working group together.
I'm concerned that there was a very quick hearing and a pass-out process, but yet the amendment you're offering today has a very extended length of time before it actually goes to the voters. Let's rush it to the voters. Why wouldn't we do that if we rushed it through committee and didn't have a chance to really deliberate? In your words, Alderman, this is a very controversial issue. You said those words twice when you were introducing this bill on the floor. So with a controversial issue, why wouldn't we have a good discussion on it in committee, as opposed to, maybe have 2-3 hearings, as opposed to the 2.5 weeks from the time it got introduced at the end of April until now? And the amendment, I think, is what is in fact disingenuous and is an allegation that charges the voters of the city of St. Louis that they didn't know what they were voting on. And now we're going to educate them even more with this amendment on the length.
Was that a question, Alderman, or was that a comment?
I guess that was more of a comment, but you're welcome
It was.
to respond.
It was. And I will respond. So, if you have a problem with the legislative process on how we push bills through, then I think that's a conversation you should have with the president and the and our general counsel to rearrange the process. But when you look at the rules of the Board of Aldermen, that's exactly how the legislative flow goes. We introduce a board bill, goes to committee, comes out of committee, goes on the floor for perfection, then it goes on the floor again for passage. That's just the rules of the Board of Aldermen. I'm not making up the rules as I go along. I wish I could. And sometimes other people have that advantage. I don't have that advantage. So I do not think that we have... No.
Let me ask.
Well, I'm not finished. I'm not finished. So thank you, Alderman. I do not think this process was rushed. The Alderman from the 23rd Ward who chairs the committee chose a date. We publicized that date. As you attended the committee hearing, you could see that people showed up in great numbers, more than any other committee hearing that we hold, to voice how they feel, whether they was in support or in opposition. So no, we did not rush this through. I do not feel like it's disingenuous. I feel like Board Bill 31 that was passed in 2012, I feel like that is disingenuous to black neighborhoods and black wards that need their representation. And then you do not have a plan set in place, Alderman. That's disingenuous. So you mean to tell me you're going to disenfranchise voters in North St. Louis and all throughout the city, honestly, but there is no real plan set in place? That's disingenuous.
Do you think it's prudent for a legislature or an alderman to give multiple hearings on, in their words, in that alderman's words, a controversial bill? Do you think that it would be likely to say we should probably have a few more hearings on something that we're defining ourselves as controversial?
Well, I think controversial to what extent would be the question we need to ask, Alderman.
You defined it, Alderman, so
I did.
you tell me.
No, I know what my definition of controversial is. So since it is a controversial issue to some people, and to some people it isn't, I think that right now we're doing the best thing by sending it to the voters to decide, right? That's what we're responsible to, the voters of this city. We're responsible to the 300,000 plus people that stay in the city of St. Louis, and we are allowing them to choose if they want to reduce wards.
I think maybe we were just disagreeing on time. I guess I would suspect we should have that discussion before we're offering amendments on the Board of Aldermen, that we should be having those discussions in the committee hearing process, which are the true public hearing processes which we adhere to through our charter. One last question, Alderman. Do you think how would you say that committee meeting went in May the 9th? Do you think there were more people there in opposition of continuing our arcane structure of bloated government, which is a reflection of our politics today? Or do you think folks were there in favor to reduce the Board of Aldermen so that we can become a leaner, more efficient government giving holistic services across the city?
Sounds more like a comment to me you just made.
No, there was a question mark on the end.
I think you was trying to answer your own question.
How did the committee go?
Alderman, I think the committee went well. I think the chairman did a great job in letting people voice their opinions and their concerns about ward reduction. However, I did not take a poll that night, so I don't know what people thought. I think it's fair to say it was 50-50.
Well, we can always go to the game tape and people can draw their conclusions. I have no further questions. Thank you.
You call it a game. I don't think it's a game.
All right. Alderman from the 23rd.
16th Ward, yield for questions.
Alderman from the 16th will yield for questions at all.
Alderman from the 23rd, I'm dying to, yes.
All right. Alderman from the 23rd, please proceed.
So do you feel we have something coming up Wednesday night, and again, I'm doing the hearing fast because I was asked to. Do you think, off of your words, that we should not pass her bill out next week and have multiple meetings, or do you think we pass that out so they can start drawing up what this will look like and have a little more time so that as they get a chance, so when this comes up in an April vote, instead of a quick November vote, they will have a chance to put out what they believe is right, or should we just delay theirs a bunch?
No, Alderman, I think that we should be prudent on a very important and controversial issue and try to have as much of an open dialogue in the committee process. And I would think a chairman of a committee would want that rather than I'm going to pass this out because I'm asked to.
So you're asking me then not to pass out the legislation on Wednesday?
No, that's not what I'm asking.
Well,
I'm asking,
so it's a bill that you're
healthy discussion.
So it's a bill that
in the
you're
committee
interested in. So you would be more in favor of us getting it out quick. What's the point of order? We're talking about the date.
Alderwoman,
The
please state, hold on for a second, everyone. You direct your questions and your comments to me, and I'll ask the Lisa, if I haven't recognized anybody, the mics are off. When you hear my voice, the mics go off, because we're not going to try to overtalk each other here. Alderwoman from the 20th, please state your point of order.
Thank you, Mr. President. Believe we're talking about the amendment and the date.
Yes.
And so I'd like to keep the conversation germane to that.
All right. All right. Alderman from the 23rd, please proceed.
That is germane, because the question is the date. And what I'm being accused of is rushing something out of committee, yet another bill. And the reason for the farther out date is because as the other bill comes out.
That does, you satisfied me. You're following the same line of questioning that the Alderman from the 16th used earlier. So please proceed.
Explains why the farther out date, why we're going to get this other piece of legislation out, whether you feel it's rushed or not rushed. It's so that between now and April, my understanding is the other group are going to put together what they believe this is going to look like, which then should help educate the voters. If we do it in November, then the group that's trying to put out why or what this will look like to educate the voters will have to do this in a very, 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 very fast time. The April date gives a lot of people a lot of time to educate. And again, my plan was hopefully to get the other piece out so that they can start forming a committee to say, if it were to go to 14 wards, what's it going to look like. I don't believe we should be rushing that group either. So I'm for the April date. It does give time to get out and educate the voters on what this will all look like.
All right, thank you. Alderwoman from the 20th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members of the board, I'd like to inquire of the Alderman from the 21st if he would yield for questions.
Alderman from the 21st will yield for questions to the Alderwoman from the 20th. Alderwoman from the 20th, please proceed.
Thank you. Alderman, are you familiar with how voter turnout changes based on month and election?
Yes, I am, Alderwoman.
Would you consider April to be a month that, generally speaking, has a high participation or a low participation?
I think when you look at voter demographics all throughout the city, whether it's 70,000 people or 7,000 people, I think it's low when you have 300,000. So my answer is we have low voter turnout in every election.
When you look at, it's true, we do tend to have low turnout, with the exception of one election in the last decade, I would say, which happens to be the election in which we considered Proposition R, in which 74% of the city's registered voters came out. But if you look at an analysis which I provided to everyone's desk, which looks at the average voter turnout rate over the last decade for our March, April, August, and November ballots. April, over the last 10 years, has an average turnout of 16.2%, the lowest of any month that we held elections. Consistently, there has not been a single April election that has greater than 30.1% turnout. In fact, most turnouts are less than 20% because there aren't that many issues on the ballot. They're primarily local. This election cycle, we only have even number wards on the ballot, so all odd number wards would be disincentivized from even showing up to the polls. And we know that April consistently has a low turnout. November, on the other hand, hasn't had a single turnout in the last decade with less than 30%. In fact, we have an average of 54.5%, 5 times the average of the April ballot. Would you consider a shift to when you typically have a higher turnout? I think that it is important that, yes, we drive people to the polls, but that we recognize that there is a likelihood that they will come to the polls to begin with. And when we start putting issues on ballots based on turnout and what we expect, that is a similar thing to gerrymandering. It's providing it's constructing an outcome based on what you're expecting to turn out. And I think that it's disingenuous to put it on a ballot that has a typically lower turnout. And for that, I would like to rise in opposition of the November ballot. I would like to further inquire of you specifically, you mentioned a process in which you gathered input from community leaders and leaders down here on how you determined that April would be the most appropriate time to have the voters consider this. Can you describe that? Who was involved in that, and whether or not that process was transparent and included members of the general public, and who that might be?
I think I have described very adequately on who was involved in this working group of people. Community leaders, aldermen, committee people, pastors, clergy members, members from the community were all involved in this process, alderwomen. And let me say this, I think it's even more disingenuous. You want to, so the same reason that you're blaming me for putting this on an April ballot, I can blame you for trying to put it on a November ballot. Because, maybe because you have an election 1 month after, or 1 month before, or maybe because you think that you'll get a higher turnout in November. I think it's disingenuous when we believe that, well, people are not going to vote in April, so we're going to put on a November ballot. Since when do we start choosing ballot initiative dates based on how people vote? Why is that part of government?
Answer that question. It happens all the time.
Well,
And
I don't know. I'm new here, so that has nothing to do with me. We chose April because it was the best date, alderwoman.
to further inquire, how many hearings did we have regarding this, and what notice was the general public given to participate in such hearing? And do you feel that the community, the public input with one meeting with 48 hours notice is adequate public notice and public dialogue on an issue this important? And would you consider that amount of public input to be germane to any topic that we move forward with at the board? Because I personally feel that one hearing with less than 48 hours notice to the general public is not a good way to do business on any issue, this or otherwise. And I would hate to see the way that we've moved this forward to be the gold standard by which we move legislation through this Board of Aldermen. I think that we hold public hearings for a reason. We answer to the general public, and we ought to have committee hearings that are working committees that actually go through the legislation and are willing to produce legislation that includes important components like dates and public input. And I fail to see how that occurred here.
Alderwoman, we had a committee hearing. We passed out of committee. The same way that you feel right now, then maybe you should address that in committee.
Committee Alderman.
Well, according to the rules of the Board of Aldermen, and I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure I'm not. According to the rules, any member of this body is more than welcome. No. Any member of this body is more than welcome to give public comment in any committee hearing. You are a citizen of the 20th Ward. Therefore, public comment was given.
Public comment, was everybody who signed up to give public comment given the opportunity to do so, or was public comment cut off by the chairman during that committee hearing?
Maybe that's a question you should ask the chairman, but I don't believe so.
My understanding that public comment was not sufficiently addressed, and that it was cut off during the hearing, and that preferential treatment was given not by signing up, but by discretion of the chairman.
Well, that I don't know. I am not the committee chairman. I do not regulate any committee business. My bill was simply referred to that committee. I think that's a question for the chairman, but I can bet no.
What I observed is that public comment was cut off, and again,
Your observation is not rooted in fact.
My observation.
Your observation is not rooted in fact. That's opinion.
I rise in opposition of putting this on
Of course you
a
do.
month that typically and consistently over the last decade has had the lowest turnout of any month that we hold elections. I would like to see this considered by the broadest number of voters in the city of St. Louis, and therefore I rise in opposition to putting it on an April ballot.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 25th and then the 24th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in opposition to this amendment for many of the reasons that have already been stated, but just some numbers out there for the general public. My colleague from the 7th Ward referenced that the last municipal election we had a 30% turnout. Putting this on the April 2019 ballot would actually put this up at the same time that we have the race for the aldermanic president seat and all of the even wards in the city of St. Louis. That election is actually the lowest election cycle anytime that's up, for election. So the last time that happened, almost 4 years ago, the turnout for that election was 12.5% of registered voters in the city of St. Louis came out. 12.5%. So the election cycle that we're talking about had roughly, this last time around, had 25,256 voters that cast a ballot in the entire city. The entire city, we had 25,256 votes counted across the entire city. Prop R passed with 80,301 votes, easily 3 times the number of total ballots cast in the last even ward election cycle. 3 times the number of ballots cast in support of that. For perspective, the 2nd Ward, the last time we had an aldermanic election in the 2nd Ward, the winner won with 891 votes. There were 1,977 votes cast in favor of Prop R in the 2nd Ward. The 4th Ward, the last time there was an aldermanic election in that ward, the alderman there won with 760 votes. There were 2,104 votes cast in favor of Prop R. The 6th Ward, there were 437 votes counted for the winner of that aldermanic election in the last election cycle. There were 3,352 votes cast in favor of Prop R. In the 8th Ward, there were 1,587 ballots casted for the winner of that election cycle. There were 4,156 votes in the 8th Ward in favor of Prop R. The last alderman that ran in the 10th Ward and won garnered 292 votes. There were 3,239 votes cast in favor of Prop R in the 10th Ward. The alderman from the 12th that serves down here with us won his election with 916 votes. There were 3,918 votes cast in favor of Prop R in the 12th Ward. In the 14th Ward, my colleague from the 14th won her election with 242 votes. Prop R passed in the 14th Ward by 2,783 votes, 10 times the number that an alderman who is currently serving down here won their election. The 16th Ward, which, by the way, is one of the highest voter turnout wards in an even election cycle, cast 3,263 votes in their last aldermanic election cycle. The 16th Ward overwhelmingly supported Prop R with 4,768 votes. The alderperson from the 18th Ward won their last election cycle with 310 votes. Prop R passed in the 18th Ward by 1,905 votes. The alderwoman from the 20th Ward won her last election with 749 votes. Prop R passed in the 20th Ward with 1,904 votes. The alderman from the 22nd Ward won his last election with 546 votes. Prop R garnered 1,829 votes in the 22nd Ward. The 24th Ward, the alderman that serves this body from the 24th Ward, won his election with 1,043 votes in the last election cycle. The 24th Ward supported Prop R with 3,566 votes. The 26th Ward alderperson won their election cycle with 1,015 votes. Prop R was supported by 2,524 votes in the 26th Ward. The alderwoman from the 28th Ward won her election with 971 votes. 971 votes. Prop R was supported by 4,465 of her constituents. This election cycle, this April 2019 election cycle, will no doubtedly be another low turnout election cycle for the city of St. Louis. Yes, it's incumbent upon all of us to generate support, opposition, get out the vote, etc. We all do that. Our committee people do that. We do our best to try that every single election cycle. But the fact remains, half of the city's elected officials are not up for election in April 2019. Half of the city is not up for election in 2019. I'm an odd ward alderman. It is not my responsibility to get out there and campaign, in 2019. I already did that a year and a half ago. I won my election. I was unopposed, thankfully, but, pretty handedly won that race. But, I say all of that because this is absolutely galling to me that a charter amendment is not something to be taken lightly. It's something that requires great deliberation, great consideration before we send it out to the voters, and then the voters have the opportunity to think and talk about that with their neighbors, their elected officials, etc. And they did so in 2012. And in 2012, the turnout in this city was 74.04%. There were 195,222 ballots cast in the 2012 election. 195,222 ballots cast. Prop R generated 80,301 yes votes. 3 times the number of the total turnout of an April even ward election cycle. I think it's absolutely appalling that we would put another charter amendment out there on an April ballot. I think it's something we should seriously consider only putting charter amendments on a November general election cycle, because that's when a majority of this city comes out to vote. And I don't think that we should be making this any more complicated for voters than it already is. And I think that this amendment is just another guise to suit special interests. And at the end of the day, we need to do the will of our voters. We had 195,222 ballots cast in 2012. I cannot reiterate that anymore. Does anyone know the entire population of the city of St. Louis right now? It's roughly 320,000 people. Out of 320,000 people, we had 195,000 people come out and cast a ballot. That means that almost every single voting age adult in the city of St. Louis cast a ballot in 2012. Almost every single voting age adult. We talk about St. Louis being a minority majority city. Well, a minority majority city, we had every single voting age adult practically voting in that election, and Prop R overwhelmingly passed. Overwhelmingly, 80,000 people supported Prop R in 2012. I think that this is a joke amendment. I think that this needs to go on the November ballot at a minimum, and that's even if this ends up passing out of this board.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 5th. I'm not sure which one of you.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I rise in support of this amendment for the simple fact that the sponsor had talked with several elected officials and other community members, and it was deemed that it would be important for us to spend some time educating voters. Now, we all can stand up here and juxtapose numbers and skew numbers and say this happened then, that happened then. We have to be honest about the turnout of that past election. I mean, it was a presidential election. I mean, we're one of the organizations that had the best ground game in the history of this country. So we can't just say, okay, the people spoke. And let's not mention the ballot language was crazy. People couldn't even really understand. A yes was a no vote, a no was a yes vote. So let's just be honest about what really took place. Let's give people time to make a proper decision on how to educate people on what's going to happen. And I'll say it again, I know it should be just in reference to the amendment, but when this was passed at the board before, I voted in opposition to it because the reduction of the board, there was no process with it. There was no communication. It was simply someone on their way out of office pushing the agenda of whoever was in power at that time in room 200, and that means less people that they had to court. So I say this again, and even the November election that's coming up now is not going to be a presidential election. So those numbers are not going to be there. So if you give people time, all of us should be trying to rile people to come out to the polls in every election, but we know that doesn't normally happen. But if we give people time so they can properly understand how a reduction of the board would affect people in North St. Louis, I think we need to let that happen. I have no further comment.
All right. Alderwoman from the 8th.
Mr. President, I rise in opposition to putting this on the April ballot. I would like to ask the Alderman from the 21st if he would yield for questions.
Alderman from the 21st will yield for questioning to the Alderwoman from the 8th.
Yes, sir, Mr. President.
Alderwoman from the 8th, please proceed.
Thank you, Alderman. Are you aware of the reason that Proposition E is on the April municipal general ballot, the earnings tax?
What's your question, Alderman?
Are you aware of the reasoning as to why that has ended up on the April municipal ballot?
Share it with me, please.
It is to suppress voter turnout. It is there to make sure that the fewest number of St. Louisans will turn out for that, and the ability of that proposition of our earnings tax to be defeated is more likely. And that is something that the Central Committee has talked about over and over again, that we have to drive up turnout in April in order to make sure that we keep our earnings tax, because we are being targeted from outstate to try to take that away. So are you aware of the previous proposition that went on the ballot that would have moved our municipal elections to August and November? So, and there, the reason that that was defeated and that was strongly campaigned against was because we don't have the ability to move Proposition E. It would be left out there on its own, again, suppressing voter turnout. People will be more likely to vote it down if it comes up at that point. My next question, are you aware of the filibuster that happened in the Senate last night?
Excuse me?
Are you aware of the filibuster that our senators from St. Louis took part in the Senate last night?
No.
So Senators Maria Spalnadal and Jamila Nasheed participating both filibustered for a number of hours in order to prevent Proposition R, right to work, from being put on the August 2018 ballot. The reason that they are opposed to that is because voter turnout is lower on that ballot. We have elected officials who stood up for hours overnight to make sure that we would get this on a ballot where more people would be present, because it is important to us as Democrats, as a part of a democratic system, to make sure that our voters turn out for this. So I don't have any further questions for the Alderman from the 21st. I rise to speak in opposition to putting this on the April ballot. I do have a question. Would the Alderwoman from the 14th yield for a question?
Alderwoman from the 4th, is it related to...
Yes, Mr. President.
Alderwoman from the 14th will yield for questioning to the Alderwoman from the 8th.
Sure. Thank you, Alderwoman. Is a November 2018 ballot enough time for you to get the information to the voters on the residency requirements for them to be, for them to be able to make an educated vote?
Yes, I believe that that's a good timing to keep the issue at the forefront and to provide some dialogue and some information and, adequately to the voters. I was considering the August ballot. However, I thought it would be prudent to allow the voters time to digest the information, to look at the pros and cons, and make a good decision on their behalf by educating themselves in a timely fashion. The August ballot tends to take up when, between now and then, there's a lot of vacations, a lot of people being away. So my choice was to put it out, when we have a broad spectrum and reason, motivation for people to come out.
Thank you, Alderman. I appreciate it. So my opposition to this remains that an April general election ballot is the lowest that we will have. My predecessor, the alderman from the 8th Ward, was elected when 893 people in the 8th Ward cast votes. That is significantly less than those that cast votes in this special election that happened 2 months ago, and it is far below the 6,212 people in my ward that came out to vote then. Historically, you can look at these numbers. You've been presented with numbers in front of you, percentages on how often people come to vote on these elections, and I think it is undemocratic to put it forward on an April ballot. And frankly, we have time and again asked for revotes on issues, and we've gotten more turnout on those. But when they're clued in for people to have enough attention to come out for these things, and we don't have that on this. We had 74% of our population vote. If this needs to come back up for a vote, I am interested in letting this come forward because I think that we have due diligence to perform here. We have not presented a plan. We have an alderwoman who has put forward a resolution to create a board to look at how 14 wards would move equitably. We had aldermen who put forward resolutions previously and were stalled in committee, were not voted on, or were not even brought forth for hearing in committee. So that it is not true that no one has tried to work on this in the past 6 years. But we have an opportunity now. We could even delay this to 2020 if we wanted. We could put a November 2020 date on this and say you've got 2.5 years to come up with a plan for 14, for 28, and present the voters with a plan. It is really hard to make a decision on something that you don't know what it will look like. So my most severe opposition to this is on the April ballot because I think it sends exactly the wrong message, the thing that we are fighting against with the state, with our earnings tax over and over again, that we're telling people that their votes don't matter. We need this to be on an election where there will be more people coming out. We have several propositions already in November. We have raised the wage. We have the Clean Missouri coming through. We're going to have a bunch of attention, a bunch of people canvassing all summer long for the right to work. We have the ability to do this now. If we push this off and people don't get confused, then we're not going to have people come out to vote. And I truly believe that if we invalidate a vote of 74% of our citizens with 30% or less of our people, then we have lost our credibility as elected officials. We have lost our power. We have lost the will of the people. We've lost the confidence of the people if we undercut by that much. And I think that backfires against all of us, no matter which way we do this government. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Alderman from the 24th, did I skip you the last one?
It's okay.
All right, please proceed. Oh, Alderman from the 24th hasn't spoken on this issue.
I'll be back to pontificate later, so I'll keep this short this time. Let's really understand what these numbers are. 80,300 yes votes last time. 80,300 yes votes last time. If this goes on the April ballot, 4 years ago, there was 10% turnout in that April election. 4 years, we're going to have something like 10% turnout again. So we're saying, let's say it goes on the April ballot, and let's say it gets 60% to change it back, okay? That means 11,000 voters will undo what 80,000 voters had voted for. How are we going to explain that? How are we going to explain that? 11,000 voters undid what 80,000 voters wanted? I cannot believe we are here arguing that a lower turnout election is better. How does that square with any of the values we normally talk about, that we want voter participation in making decisions? Voters have a right to pick the structure of their government. That is what, local control, what cities are about. Local voters have some influence over what their local government looks like. I don't know how to say this the right way, but I just cannot believe that we're going to have to be out there explaining possibly how 11,000 voters undid what 80,000 voters wanted. This is potentially a serious manipulation of the electoral process. Now, I think it's a bad idea to vote on this again. However, if we're going to vote on it again, let's at least make it fair and put it on a November ballot. where you have competitive elections. In the April 2019 election, there are going to be no competitive races. All it is the Democratic nominees for aldermen. Half the wards will have nothing on the ballot except this, and the other half will only have one choice for aldermen. There will be 0 competitive elections across the city. That's not how you get the broadest input into an electoral process. The language was not confusing last time. I have it right here. It says, this amendment restructures the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis as a body of 14 aldermen representing 14 wards. If you wanted 14 aldermen, you voted yes. If you wanted 28 aldermen, you voted no. I think people understood that. Now, how many times, somebody tweeted me this morning and they said, why do we even vote on things if elected bodies just go and undo what we voted on, right? Hey, I don't want to vote on this again. I think voters spoke, but if we're going to vote on it again, we are going to save all of ourselves an enormous amount of headaches explaining what we did if we just put it on the November ballot when people are going to show up and vote. It's not my preference, but that's a heck of a lot better than April. And if I may, I know there are other speakers up, but I think there's another amendment, so perhaps we can move on, and I would yield to the alderman from the 7th if that's permissible.
Alderman, anyone who hasn't spoken for the first time on the amendment number 1, Alderman from the 1st.
President, members of the board, I have often talked about the evils of April elections. And where I learned about the evils is because, this astute board down here violated my rights and the rights of those who had voted for me. Let me read you my last election when I was the 20th ward. This is the people who hated me. Tyus trounces her rivals. Tyus has established that the 20th ward wants her to stay. Tyus is the leader in the 20th ward. The people ought to give the money back who ran against her. These were the headlines I got from my last election. And that was in March of 1999. And then less than 2 years later, this astute board came along because they had never been able to beat me, and they invalidated the election of the people in the 20th ward, the real 20th ward, and said to hell with who you all want to, and moved my ward and the highest voting Democratic ward, because although the 16th ward is astute, they vote Republican, but the 20th ward was the highest voting Democratic ward in the city of St. Louis. And my good all these white colleagues down here, and you, Mr. President, for the Negroes, voted to undo what the people had done, okay? So for all of those people who are talking about the right process, first of all, we're not in the right process right now, because I hear white people all the time and they want to be part of it. I want to do right. But whenever you start talking about the real way that you do right, first thing, 4 people, put your hands up who want to leave right now because you have no business being here. And I'm talking about 4 white aldermen. You have no business being here. So when you talk about, oh, this is horrible, I don't like April elections. I learned about the horribleness of April elections when Jack Kodar used to work for the Democratic Central Committee under Brian Wabi.
Hold on a second. Alderman, please state your point of order.
Member of this deliberative body, I'd appreciate it if you'd, well, I am now. If you're going to talk about me, I have the respect to use your title.
Alderman, you have the comments. Everybody, the comments come toward me, so please state your point of order, Alderman.
I'd simply like the respect that I've always shown the alderwoman from the 1st, and please use my title if you're going to refer to me on the floor of this body.
Actually, and Alderwoman from the 1st, I know you know that that's the rule. You have to refer to it by the ward number. So please. I know, but I think you know, yeah, but just aldermen of the 7th. All right, yeah. Perfect. Hold on for a second. Let me. Do you have an additional point of order? Yeah. But hold on. Everybody, hold on for a second. Hold on for a second. Alderman from the 1st, please proceed. Just use the ward number. Go ahead.
currently, who was not the alderman of the 7th then, was being paid by the Democratic Central Committee to assist us, while many of us were unaware that he was getting paid and were upset about it, that he reported to Brian Wabi. And that's when I learned about...
Alderman from the 25th, please state your point of order.
A number of colleagues that have been shut off because they haven't been talking about the date of the election and the amendment specifically. Right now we're talking about the alderman from the 7th ward and his time working with the Missouri Democratic Community. I think it needs to remain specific to the date of the amendment and the amendment itself. Thank you.
Alderwoman from the 1st, please keep your statements germane to the April 2019 ballot.
April elections being a committee woman. And what I learned about April elections being a committee woman was that people do plan things. That's where I learned about it. From the Democratic Central Committee chair, Brian Wabi, who says we have to have this MSD election because people vote at different times. So I have often been down here opposing April elections. But the very people when I was opposing it, those were the people voting for it. So it goes back to what I hear about from a former colleague of the 4th Ward, who Bertha Mitchell used to say, Alderwoman Mitchell used to say, depends on whose ox is gored. In the real world, I really would like November elections. I wish they would not have these April elections because I don't like them, and I do want to see the most people participate. But here's what happens. When you play that game, don't ask me to unilaterally disarm. They talked about, so if you don't want that, then don't you vote for any of those April elections, okay? You make sure you're always opposed to those. And I keep hearing people talk about, we already had an election and the people spoke. We had an election in 2004. In 2004, let me see how many people here. Almost 75,000 people voted no to the reduction of the Board of Aldermen. 75,000, 50-some-odd thousand. This was in a November election. So why were we bringing it back in the first place? I'll tell you why, because there's an agenda going on, okay? And the same person, let's get back and tie it together. The same person that handled that redistricting bill to make sure that the 20th Ward got moved and that we reduced the number of black aldermen when we lost 30%, that would be the alderwoman of the 7th, also handled this bill in 2012 because the more we have young older people who don't know what is going on, then you don't know your history, and so you tend to go along with it. So if you're going to talk about history, why did we have a 2012 when 2004 we soundly defeated everything that was brought before us? So don't act like we didn't bring this back up again and again. The same thing with residency. Why we keep bringing this residency stuff up? Because we have voted on it over and over again. Because the next person comes in and the next person, and you keep trying to change it. And why are you trying to change it? Because you have an agenda. Most certainly the alderman from the 21st Ward has an agenda. That's what he's down here for. And what we are all down here is to protect our communities. And the North St. Louis is being attacked. And when you talk to black aldermen, you act like you are tone deaf if you don't hear. It's not that if you want to get rid of some of them, get rid of. I tell you what, leave North St. Louis alone and just get rid of all the nice white aldermen that you want to get rid of. Because what I'm telling you is that it is too hard to represent North St. Louis, especially. It's not the things that we've done, it's the thing that this board has done. All the white aldermen, because we had 13, all white aldermen voted to tear up my community. Every white alderman down here voted to tear up my community. And then when we say, let's try to put this back, let's look at this, because I want to tell you, I wasn't on this board in 2012, but guess what? I still opposed it, and we defeated it. We defeated it because even though I had been done wrong personally and my community had really been done wrong, we defeated it because it is wrong for North St. Louis, and it's wrong for, if you ever go and want to read about what representation is supposed to be about. Government is not about, the expedient. We want to have such a large body. No, government is supposed to have neighborhoods that are represented so they can have their thoughts and inputs. It's not to say, shut up, I don't want to hear you. It's not to be able to override votes that have happened and you do what you want to. If you are really serious about not having April votes, we can take that off of calendar. We can make sure we never have it. But as I said before, as I hear the people getting up saying, and I'm not talking about the new people, but people who have participated in this farce, you have no right to get up and now say, I don't want an April vote. You don't want an April vote for your own political reason. And therefore, even though I do not like April votes, I am going to vote for the April votes, because what I do want more than everything else is for this to go back on go back before the electorate and for us to inform. I was furious when I saw this. I called up aldermen who were down here and said, how did you let this go? Why did you let this go when we had done in 2004? We had spoken so loudly against this. And what I want to say is that you still are not hearing North St. Louis. You act like we don't exist, and you want to just quiet us down of why we don't think this is a good idea. Now, I know for a fact that it was not good information out there, okay? Because all we had to do was put out one little flyer, not two, not three, one little flyer. And for you all don't believe about impact, about what you do, you need to come and talk to my community about how they feel. This is the neighborhood I live in. This is the craziness that you guys did down here. I have 4 aldermen in my neighborhood. We had 1. That's what happens. So if you don't like correction, don't do the deed in the first place. And when I say you, it doesn't have to be you personally. It could be your predecessors. But what happened is your predecessor has set up something where we have 11 black aldermen and 17 white aldermen when we should have 15 black aldermen. And now you're pressing to try to keep an advantage any way you can. It's still not making the city not be black. Instead of accepting that we're going to have black leadership, and it's going to be majority black leadership, and you're just going to have it your way. Anything that the former alderwoman from the 7th introduced, let me tell you, I already know that's the KKK, and I would never be for it in the first place, okay? I came down here working with her, but the things that she introduced over the years were always detrimental to St. Louis, and most definitely detrimental to North St. Louis. What is it that makes you all think that you know more than all the people that represent these North St. Louis wards and the things that you have that happen there? Again, I don't like April. I am in support of the April date because I couldn't get them to change. In my better world, I would have been with November. And at this point, I'm going to move to call the question, which I never do.
Alderwoman from the 1st, you moved to call the question on the amendment, and there's been a second from the alderman from the 21st. Call the question on the amendment. That is a non-debatable motion, as everybody knows. There's automatic roll call, and what that means is that if the vote comes back in the affirmative that we call the question, we go directly to the vote on the amendment that was introduced by the alderman from the 21st. And there will be no debate, no further debate here, and no further debate on that motion. We go directly to the vote, okay? So again, a vote in the affirmative means that no more discussion, and we go directly to the vote on the amendment number 1. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cohn. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed. Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Cohn. Alderman Volmer. Mr. President, you have 15 aye votes and 12 no votes.
By your vote, you have sustained the motion of the Alderwoman from the 1st. That takes us directly to the vote on Amendment number 1 that was introduced by the Alderman from the 21st and the 18th. And all right, so just to restate what's in front of us. Amendment number 1 was setting the election date for Board Bill number 25 to April 2nd, 2019. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Roddy. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cohn. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
Aye.
Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Martin. Mr. President, you have 15 aye votes and 13 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 21st. Amended Board Bill 25 to be April 2nd, 2019. Alderman from the 7th. And thank you for your patience.
On the bill?
Yes.
As amended?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Then
Thank
you can
Mr.
still
President. Yes,
amend it.
I move to amend Board Bill number 25 as amended. A copy of Amendment 2 is on everybody's desk, and this would change the date of the election to November 6th, 2018.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 24th. Alderman from the 7th, please proceed.
Yeah, so we just had obviously a lengthy debate on the date of this election, and I think maybe there was some confusion on what people were voting on. Maybe not. Maybe this will fail. I don't know. Still think if the folks who want this to go to the voters are serious about it, it should be on the November election ballot, which is the highest turnout election we have, just as it was in 2012. So I would hope that people will favorably consider and vote aye for amendment number 2, so we can move this election to the November 6, 2018 ballot. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderman from the 21st.
Mr. President, I just want to clarify, I am against amendment number 2 to Board Bill 25. And Alderman from the 7th, this will be defeated. This will not pass. I want you to know that.
All right, any further discussion? Any further discussion? Any further discussion? It's been moved by the Alderman from the 7th, seconded by the Alderman from the 24th, that we amend Board Bill 25 as amended to set the election date to November 6, 2018. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. No. Alderman Moore. No. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Roddy. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cohn. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
No. 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 I said no.
Noted. Alderman Volmer. Alderman Arnowitz. Mr. President, there are 13 aye votes and 15 no votes.
By vote, you failed to abstain. You failed to adopt Amendment 2 to Board Bill 25. So now what's before us is Board Bill 25 as amended. Alderwoman from the 8th.
Mr. Speaker, I rise with an amendment to clarify the ballot language that will go forward. I believe that if we are going to put this to the voters, we have a duty to make the clearest possible language. Everyone should have this amendment on their desk. I'm going to go ahead and read the previous, what is in the board bill currently. Currently it says, this amendment will prevent the restructuring of the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis by its reduction from a body of 28 aldermen representing 28 wards to a body of 14 aldermen representing 14 wards. My offered ballot language, in order to keep the pieces of this together as we go forward so it is clear as possible, says this amendment will prevent the restructuring of the Board of Aldermen of the City of St. Louis to a body of 14 aldermen representing 14 wards and will maintain the current structure of a body of 28 aldermen representing 28 wards.
Okay.
Do you want further discussion on that, or do I open up for questions at this point?
If you want to make a motion, just make a motion to adopt amendment.
I make a motion that we adopt Amendment 3 on Board Bill 25.
It's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th and seconded by the Alderman from the 9th. Any further discussion on amendment number 3? Alderman from the 21st.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want this to be clear as well. I am against Amendment Number 3 to Board Bill 25. Alderman from the 8th Ward, we will defeat this as well. I'm against it.
Alderman, Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I tend to pride myself on being a wordsmith and have a clear understanding of the English language. And I stand to say to you, this is more confusing than the other language. And I've been in a process of 30 elections and have had the opportunity to be on the state level of redistricting as well, on the state level committee. We have looked at and talked about all the rules and regs of redistricting, and this is not clear. If we want to confuse people, what you're going to end up with is that if you want to keep 28 wards, you're going to lose it with this. So this is even more confusing. It's going to be, this is even more confusing. So I'm just going to say that I'm going to vote no on this. I suggest that everybody calm down for one thing, because all we've been doing all morning is jockeying with politics. Because you see, anytime voters have already voted on something 2 or 3 times and made it very clear to you on what they wanted, and you want to just ignore them again, I'm going to let them vote. All I wanted to do is go on the ballot very clear and let the people overwhelmingly vote their mind again. You can't construct how they're going to vote with this kind of language. If anything, you're going to confuse them, and you're going to lose the issue that you're trying to win. So some people have shared with me that the voters were ignorant, that they weren't educated, and so they didn't know how they were voting. Well, I tell you, we have very educated voters. They know what they're talking about. They know what they want, and they've wanted it for a long time. So, but I'm going to support this bill, because you know what? Let the voters vote again, and maybe we'll leave them alone and accept the outcome, okay? That's where I'm at. Because every email I have received, they said leave it as it is because we already voted. But you know what? To have peace in this city of St. Louis, and most especially to have peace and let the people who are most interested in their positions to maintain them without even having a conversation about how we're going to restructure and how we maintain those different entities. Because you see, we still got plenty of time for planning. We won't even get our census numbers to 2021. So everybody needs to calm down. But if you want to send it to the voters again, do that. But don't confuse them even more. Just don't do that. Thank you.
Any further discussion on Amendment Number 3? Any further discussion on Amendment Number 3? Alderwoman from the 8th, you recognize the close on Amendment Number 3.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to just quickly walk through this one more time, that the way that the phrases work together here says this amendment will prevent the restructuring of the Board of Aldermen to a body of 14 aldermen representing 14 wards, and will maintain the current structure. I think a yes to will maintain the current structure of 28 aldermen is perfectly clear. It is unclear when you say this amendment will prevent the restructuring by its reduction from a body of 28 aldermen. There, I think your phrases are overlapping. I think that this is the most clear that you can put forward, and what I don't want to do is I don't want to come back in another couple years and say, this didn't make sense. We didn't know what we were voting on, right? We're trying to, if we're bringing this back to the people, we want it to be as clear as possible. So I just, this is something that I also wish we would have been able to take care of in committee. I realize that there was an attempt to have that discussion, but that was not allowed forward. So we're amending on the floor, and Mr. President, I renew my motion.
All right, it's been moved by the Alderwoman from the 8th, seconded by the Alderman from the 9th, that we adopt Amendment Number 3 to Board Bill Number 25. Is there a request for previous roll? There's been an objection to previous roll. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Rhodey. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. No. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson.
Mr. Clerk, continue.
Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed.
No.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Volmer. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Howard.
Mr. Clerk, did you get that? Alderman from the 26th?
Yes.
No.
Alderman Cone. You have 12 aye votes and 14 no votes, Mr. President.
12 aye, 14 no. By your vote, you fail to sustain the motion. The Alderwoman from the 8th, amendment number 3 fails. Alderman from the 23rd.
Board bill as amended, I'd like to call the question.
It's been it's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd and seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd that we call the question on the Board Bill number 25 as amended. Second. Wait a minute. 22nd. All right. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 23rd and seconded by the Alderman from the 22nd that we call the question, which would eliminate any further debate on Board Bill number 25 as amended. That's a non-debatable motion. A vote in the affirmative will take us directly to the vote on the perfection of Board Bill number 25 as amended with no further debate. So, Mr. Clerk, please call the roll.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Roddy. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cone. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed. She was 6, so she wants to go to 11.
He's going to, the clerk's going to go back around. He's going to continue. Yeah, he's not, he hasn't finished.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderwoman Murphy. She did. You have 15 aye votes and 11 no votes, Mr. President.
By your vote, you sustain the motion of the Alderman from the 23rd. So what's now before us is the perfection of Board Bill number 25 as amended. A vote in the affirmative will perfect Board Bill 25 as amended. A vote against it will be a vote against the perfection of Board Bill 25 as amended. Mr. Clerk, please call the roll. There's been an objection to previous roll. Please call the roll, Mr. Clerk.
Alderwoman Tyus. Alderwoman Middlebrook. Alderman Bosley. Alderman Moore. Alderwoman Hubbard. Alderwoman Ingrassia. Alderman Kotar. Alderwoman Rice. Alderman Gunther. Alderman Volmer. Alderwoman Martin. Alderman Arnowitz. Alderwoman Murphy. Alderwoman Howard. Alderwoman Green. Alderman Oldenburg. Alderman Roddy. Alderman Kennedy. Alderwoman Davis. Alderwoman Spencer. Alderman Muhammad. Alderman Boyd. Alderman Vaccaro. Alderman Ogilvy. Alderman Cohn. Alderman Williamson. Alderwoman Boyd. Alderwoman Navarro. President Reed. Alderwoman Rice. Alderwoman Green. Mr. President, 15 aye votes and 13 no votes.
By your vote, you sustain the motion, Alderman, from the 21st and perfected Board Bill number 25 as amended.
That is the extent of board bills for perfection, Mr. President.
We will dispense with line item 17. We will dispense with line items 17 and 18 and 19. Alderman from 19th, you recognize on the motion for courtesy resolutions. Calendar.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that we adopt our courtesy resolution agenda.
Moved by the Alderman from the 19th. Entertain a second on that motion. Seconded by the Alderman from the 24th. Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
We dispense with line items 21 and 22. Wait a minute. Okay. So, first reading of resolutions.
Resolution number 16, sponsored by President Reed. The Board of Aldermen will convene hearings under its authority for the purpose of hearing the complaints related to the lack of payment by the RCSA and to investigate whether the RCSA has complied with Missouri Revised Statute 67.653 in the provision to grant or award 15% of contracts and employment opportunities to racial minorities and report its findings and recommendations to the Board of Aldermen by Friday, July 13th, 2018.
Alderman from the 4th, you recognize on the first reading of resolution number 16.
Mr. President, I recommend that we move resolution number 16, is it?
Yes.
To wait to the my committee.
Okay. To intergovernmental. It's been moved by the Alderman from the 4th and seconded by the Alderwoman from the 1st that we assign resolution number 16 to intergovernmental. Any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. Mr. Clerk, please assign resolution number 16 to intergovernmental.
So noted.
Second reading resolutions. We have none.
There are none.
Miscellaneous unfinished business.
We have none.
Announcements.
On Wednesday, May 16th, 2018, Housing and Urban Development will meet at 9 a.m. in the Kennedy Room. On Wednesday, May 16th, Ways and Means will meet at 8:30 a.m. in the Leisure Room. On Wednesday, May 16th, Legislation will meet at 6:30 p.m. in the Kennedy Room. The full board will meet again on May 18th, 2018. There are no further announcements, Mr. President.
Any further announcements? Alderman from the 18th, you have an announcement?
I do. Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to call a Public Safety Committee meeting for Tuesday at 11 a.m. in the Kennedy Room.
Mr. Clerk, please make note of that.
So noted.
Any further announcements? Alderwoman from the 1st.
Yes, sir. Mr. President, Mr. President, members of the board, I'd like to call a public employees meeting. Did he say Tuesday at 11?
Yeah.
Okay, I don't want to conflict with that. Tuesday at 9:30. Okay, so we'll be before that.
Mr. Clerk, make note of that. Tuesday at 9:30.
So
yes,
noted.
sir. And And can I just add, we had the Director of Personnel before our committee for 2 hours this past Wednesday. For those of you all who could not come, you should watch the video. He told us so much that we need to be looking at. I intend to have him come back, but it was like going to a 2-hour college cram course. He was so good and full of information. And there are some things that I'm going to be sharing with you digitally as he sends me things, because as we look at this budget and ways to cut waste, there are ways that I think he told us in many different areas that we can cut waste out of our budget as we look to how we need to balance our budget.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Alderwoman from the 19th.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. I'd like to schedule a Transportation Committee meeting for Thursday at 10:30.
So noted.
Mr. Clerk. Any further announcements? Any further announcements? Further announcements. Alderman from the 18th, you recognize on the motion to excuse.
The President, members of the board, my understanding that all members were present.
All right, you recognize on the motion to adjourn.
Mr. President, members of the board, I move that the board adjourns until Friday, May 18th, 2010, 10 a.m.
It's been moved by the Alderman from the 18th, seconded by the Alderman from the 20th. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Stand adjourned.